The following is an extended version of the previous script, adding more detail, humour and observations to make the journey even more vivid and engaging. Welcome to the Oregon Trail, now with more dysentery. Hollywood makes the Oregon Trail look like a grand adventure of brave pioneers conquering the Wild West, with nothing but grit and determination. They show you wide-open vistas, triumphant wagon trains, and maybe a few noble, stoic native folks. Here's what they don't show you. Most travellers spent their days knee-deep in mud, fighting off mosquitoes the size of small birds and shitting their brains out from dysentery. The Oregon Trail wasn't some heroic journey. It was 2,000 miles of pure, unadulterated misery that 500,000 people somehow convinced themselves was a good idea. Oh, and if you're enjoying these surprisingly grim tales of historical woe, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. I'm super curious where you're all listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world. Alright, let's head back to 1847. Trust me, it's going to be quite a ride. Dawn in Independence, the glamorous start of a bad idea. So, congratulations. You just woke up in a cramped, one-room cabin in Independence, Missouri. It's April 1847, and your eyes are struggling to adjust to the dim light, filtering through the oiled paper window. The rough-hewn wood floor beneath your straw mattress is cold against your bare feet. You can smell coffee brewing over the hearth fire, mixed with the lingering scent of last night's cornbread and the earthy musk of the livestock just outside. Honestly, it smells like a farm animal's armpit in here. Your name is Thomas Benton. Well, that's what everyone's been calling you since you were old enough to pull weeds from your pa's cornfield. And this morning isn't like other mornings. Today's the day your family joins a wagon train heading west to Oregon. 2,000 miles of unknown territory stretching ahead of you, which, for the record, sounds like a terrible idea. Your pa has been talking about Oregon for months now, ever since your neighbour Mr. Wilkins came back from a meeting in town with wild stories about free land. 160 acres for anyone willing to work it. That's bigger than the entire town of Independence. That's more land than your family has ever dreamed of owning. Apparently, Mr. Wilkins failed to mention the part about how you might die getting there. Or, just really, really wish you had. Thomas, you up yet? Your ma's voice cuts through your thoughts. She's already been awake for an hour packing the last of your family's belongings and cooking breakfast. Superwoman, apparently. Coming, Ma. You pull on your rough cotton shirt and homespun trousers. The fabric is scratchy against your skin like a permanent exfoliation treatment, but it's sturdy. Needs to be, for what lies ahead. In the main room, your little sister Sarah is helping Ma pack food into a wooden crate. Your pa is outside, checking the wagon one last time. You've spent the last month getting ready, selling most of what you own, buying supplies, fixing up the old farm wagon. Basically liquidating your entire life for a chance at more dirt and probably a lot of grit in your teeth. Eat quick now, Ma says, handing you a tin plate with cornmeal mush and a strip of salt pork. We need to be at the meeting spot by 7. The food is hot and filling. You savour it, knowing that meals on the trail won't be this good. You've heard stories from other families who've made the journey. 6 months of hardtack, beans, and whatever poor creature the men can shoot. Sounds delicious, like a gourmet meal of desperation. Outside, the April morning is cool but promising warmth later. Your pa is walking around the wagon, checking every bolt and joint. It's not one of those big Conestoga wagons you've seen in drawings. Those are too heavy, too expensive. Yours is a farm wagon, what folks are calling a prairie schooner, with wooden hoops bent over the top and a canvas cover stretched tight. It looks less like a majestic ship and more like a covered box on wheels, a box that will soon smell like unwashed pioneers. Morning, son, Pa says when he sees you. Ready for the big adventure? You nod, though your stomach knots with a mix of excitement and fear. You're leaving behind everything you've ever known, your school, your friends, the graves of your baby brothers who didn't survive their first winters. You just hope Oregon has better medical care, or at least fewer things that want to kill you, and maybe some actual doctors, not just midwives with strong opinions. Come help me with the oxen, Pa says. The 4 oxen are already yoked and waiting. They're not the family's original work animals. Pa traded the farm horses for these beasts last month. Horses might be faster, but they can't pull as long or eat as little as oxen. And, according to Pa, they're more likely to be stolen by Indians. Indians. The word sends a shiver down your spine. You've heard stories. Some say they'll attack the wagon trains. Others say they're mostly peaceful. Your ma packed an extra tin of sugar and some bright cloth scraps for trading with them, just in case. Because nothing says peaceful diplomacy like a handful of hard candy and some brightly coloured fabric. It's almost insulting, but hey, it's what Ma came up with. The great snake begins its slither. By the time the sun is properly up, your family is ready. The wagon is packed so full you can barely see inside it. Barrels of flour and cornmeal, bags of beans, dried meat, coffee, sugar, tools for farming and building, your ma's prized cast iron skillet and Dutch oven, seeds for planting, your pa's rifle and ammunition, and a small chest with your family Bible and your ma's wedding quilt. Everything else you owned has been sold or given away. There's barely room for people in the wagon. Not that it matters, you'll all be walking most of the way. Only the very young, very old, or very sick ride in the wagons. So, basically, you get to walk for 2,000 miles. Fun dot. Your feet are already aching in protest. Time to go, Pa says, and there's a catch in his voice. He was born in this cabin built by his own father. Leaving it behind is harder than he lets on. You see him glance back, a flicker of sentimentality in his usually stoic eyes. Ma wipes her eyes with her apron, then squares her shoulders. Sarah clutches her rag doll, the only toy she was allowed to bring, and looks up at you with wide eyes. It's going to be okay, Squirt, you tell her, though you're not entirely sure yourself. You just hope her rag doll doesn't get dysentery. The wagon creaks as Pa flicks the reins and calls to the oxen. The wheels turn, and just like that you're leaving the only home you've ever known. The journey to the meeting spot takes less than an hour. As you approach, you see dozens of other wagons already gathered in a large field on the outskirts of town. Men are checking harnesses and wheels, women are organising supplies. Children run between the wagons, playing tag while they still can, probably regretting it later when they have to walk all day, and then they'll complain about their blisters. At the centre of it all stands a tall man with a bushy beard and weathered skin. This must be Mr. Davidson, the wagon master who will be leading your train. Your pa told you he's made the journey 3 times already. Hard to imagine anyone wanting to do this more than once. The man must be a glutton for punishment. Or really likes dirt. Or he just really enjoys telling people how difficult things are going to be. As your wagon pulls up, other families nod in greeting. You recognise some from town, the Millers with their 5 children, old widow Jenkins who's travelling with her son's family, the Browns who sold their blacksmith shop to buy supplies for the journey. A whole collection of optimists, or perhaps just people who haven't heard the full story. Mr. Davidson climbs onto a wagon and raises his hands for quiet. The chatter dies down as everyone gathers around. "Folks," he calls out, his voice carrying across the field. "Today we begin our journey to Oregon country. We've got about 120 wagons, 430 souls by my count. That's a good size. Big enough for protection, not so big we'll strip the land bare as we go." He pauses, looking around at the faces turned up to him. "I won't lie to you. The trail ahead is hard. Some of you won't make it to Oregon." A murmur runs through the crowd. You feel Sarah's hand slip into yours, squeezing tight. Cheery start, Mr. Davidson. He really knows how to motivate a crowd. Maybe he should have been a motivational speaker. You will get dysentery, but you might also get free land. "But most of you will," Davidson continues, clearly a fan of emotional whiplash. "And what waits for you there is worth every hardship. Land, freedom, a chance to build something new." He goes on to explain the rules of the trail, how the wagons will travel, who takes what positions, the importance of staying together. Each family will take turns at different duties, scouting ahead, guarding the livestock, night watch. "We move out in 1 hour," Davidson finishes. "Say your goodbyes to independence. Next stop, Oregon country." As the crowd disperses, you look back toward town. The church steeple is just visible over the trees. You wonder if you'll ever see it again. Probably not. And you realize you're trading a familiar life for a whole lot of unknowns, a sore back, and potentially a very undignified death. "Thomas," your pa calls, "help me secure these barrels." And just like that, there's no more time for wondering. There's work to be done, work that will keep you from thinking too much, which is probably for the best. Day 1, already over it. The next hour passes in a blur of final preparations. The wagons are arranged in the order they'll travel. Your family's wagon is 20th in line. Mr. Davidson rides up and down the line, checking that everyone is ready. At precisely 9 o'clock, he fires a pistol into the air. "Wagons, ho!" he calls. The train lurches into motion, the lead wagons start rolling, and one by one the others follow. When it's your turn, Pa calls to the oxen, and your journey truly begins. The first day's travel is easy, shockingly easy. The road out of Independence is well worn and relatively smooth. The oxen plod along at about 2 miles per hour. You walk alongside the wagon with Sarah while Ma sits on the wagon seat with Pa. The other wagons stretch ahead and behind as far as you can see, like a great dusty snake winding across the landscape. The dust is already starting to cling to your clothes, a fine, gritty layer that will become your second skin. By midday, the excitement has worn off. Your feet hurt, and the dust kicked up by the wagons ahead makes you cough. Sarah is dragging her feet, complaining of tiredness. You realise this isn't a walk in the park. It's just a very long walk. In a very dusty park. "Up you go," you say, lifting her onto the wagon. There's no room inside, but she can sit on top of the canvas-covered supplies. "When are we going to get to Oregon?" she asks, already sounding defeated. You laugh. "Not for a long time, Squirt. We've got about 170 days of this." Her eyes widen. "That's forever." "Oh no, just until October or so," you tell her. "We'll get there before the snow falls if we're lucky." If we're lucky. You've heard the stories of the Donner Party, trapped in the mountains by early snow last year. The rumours of what they did to survive. You shudder and push the thought away. Best not to think about cannibalism before supper, especially not when supper is just more beans. The first day ends after about 15 miles. Mr. Davidson signals for the wagons to form a circle for the night, not because of any danger from Indians this early in the journey, but because it's good practice. The circle creates a corral for the livestock and defines the camp. Setting up camp is chaotic at first. No one quite knows what they're doing yet. It's a symphony of confused shouting and clanking metal. But within an hour, tents are pitched, fires are lit, and the smell of cooking food fills the air. Ma is making a simple supper of bacon and beans with biscuits cooked in the Dutch oven buried in coals. Luxury. Compared to what's coming, this is probably a 5-star meal. As darkness falls, someone pulls out a fiddle and starts playing. Others join in with harmonicas, a banjo, even a tin whistle. People gather around the fires, singing songs from back home. Sweet Betsy from Pike. Oh, Susanna. Buffalo Gals. You sit with your family watching the stars come out above the prairie. They seem brighter here, away from the lights of town. Or maybe you're just more aware of them now that there's nothing else to look at. Sarah falls asleep in your ma's lap, worn out from the day's excitement. Get some rest, Pa tells you. Tomorrow's another day on the trail. You crawl into the small tent your family has pitched beside the wagon. The ground is hard beneath your blanket, but you're too tired to care. As you drift off to sleep, the sound of distant singing mingles with the lowing of cattle and the rustle of the prairie wind. Maybe this won't be so bad. Maybe the first day was just a trick. River crossings and reality checks. The routine of trail life establishes itself quickly. Up before dawn, breakfast of coffee and biscuits, hitch the oxen, and on the trail by 7. Walk all day with breaks to rest the animals. Make camp at dusk. Eat, sleep, repeat. It's like the world's longest, dustiest, and most uncomfortable camping trip. A never-ending cycle of sore feet and bland food. The landscape changes gradually as you move west. The familiar woods and fields of Missouri give way to open prairie. The grass stretches to the horizon, waving in the breeze like a great green ocean. It's beautiful, in a where are all the trees and actual landmarks kind of way. You start to miss the comforting sight of a proper forest. After a week on the trail, you reach the Kansas River. It's your first major river crossing. and the excitement in the camp is palpable. Some of the smaller streams you've crossed so far were simple. The oxen waded through, pulling the wagons behind them. But the Kansas is different. It's wide and deep with a strong current. Basically, a giant wet obstacle course designed to test your sanity and your wagon's structural integrity. Mr. Davidson calls a meeting. "We'll be ferrying the wagons across," he announces. "There's a trading post here that runs a ferry. It'll cost $2 per wagon." There are grumbles from some of the men. $2 is a lot of money. You can hear the protests, the calculations of how many beans that could buy. "It's that or risk losing your wagon and everything in it," Davidson says sharply. "I've seen too many people try to ford this river and lose everything. Some lost their lives." That quiets the complaints. When your choices are pay $2 or maybe die, $2 starts to look pretty reasonable. Suddenly, those hard-earned coins feel a lot less important than not drowning. The crossing takes all day. The ferry is just a large raft that can hold one wagon at a time. The oxen swim across separately. By sunset, half the wagons are across, with the rest to follow tomorrow. Your family's wagon makes it across without incident, though watching it float on the rickety ferry makes your heart pound. The oxen bellow in fear as they're forced to swim, but they make it to the other side, dripping and exhausted, probably cursing your name in ox-speak and plotting their revenge via slow, deliberate pacing. That night, camp is split between the two sides of the river. You can see the fires of the other half of your train across the water. It feels strange to be separated, vulnerable somehow, like half of your body is already in the future while the other half is stuck in the past. "Will there be more rivers like this?" Sarah asks as you sit by the fire. "Many more," Pa says, listing them off like a grim litany. The Platte, the North Platte, the Sweetwater, the Snake, the Columbia. Each one a challenge. "But we'll cross them all," Ma adds firmly. "Just like we crossed this one." Her voice is steady, but you can see the determination etched around her eyes. You nod, but in your mind you're counting the rivers ahead. Each one a potential disaster. Each one a squishy, wet barrier between you and your new home. As you lie in your tent that night, listening to the rushing of the Kansas River, you wonder what other challenges await on the long road to Oregon. And how many more times your heart can pound like that without giving out. Welcome to the School of Hard Knocks and Broken Legs. The next morning, you're awakened by a commotion. People are shouting, running. You scramble out of the tent to see what's happening. A man from another family is being carried into camp, his leg bloody and twisted at an unnatural angle. His wagon had broken loose on the ferry and crushed his leg against the riverbank. Great. Just what we needed. A live-action anatomy lesson, completely unasked for, and definitely not in the brochure. The wagon train has no proper doctor, but Mrs. Peterson was a midwife back in Illinois. She takes charge, cleaning and splinting the leg. The man's screams make Sarah cover her ears and bury her face against Ma's skirt. It's a sound that will stick with you for a long time. "Will he die?" Sarah whispers. "No, honey," Ma says, but her face is grim. A bad injury like this, with months of travel ahead, you all know his chances aren't good. Ma's pragmatism is both comforting and terrifying. In these parts, an injury isn't just an inconvenience, it's often a death sentence. By noon, the rest of the wagons have crossed. The injured man's family decides to turn back to independence. They can't continue with him in this condition. 3 other families choose to go with them, shaken by the accident, and no longer sure they want to face the trail. As they depart, heading east while your train continues west, a sobering reality settles over the group. You've been on the trail just over a week, and already your numbers are smaller. It's like a deadly slow-motion game of Oregon Trail Battle Royale, and you're just hoping you don't get measles or snake bite. That night, there's no music around the campfires. People speak in hushed voices, glancing back toward the river as if it marks a boundary they can never recross. In a way, it does. You're committed now. Oregon or bust. And by bust, we mean possibly dying of dysentery, a broken leg, or just plain giving up. The options are not looking great. Rain, mud, and a moment of joy. The next morning, it rains. Not a gentle spring shower, but a prairie deluge. The canvas wagon cover drums with it, water finding every tiny hole and seam. The ground turns to mud that sucks at your boots with every step. The oxen struggle, sometimes sinking to their knees. Progress slows to less than 10 miles that day. By evening, everyone is soaked, cold, and miserable. Making fires is nearly impossible with wet wood. Families huddle in their wagons or under them, eating cold food and trying to stay warm. Your ma somehow manages to keep a small fire going, long enough to heat coffee. The hot liquid is the only comfort on this miserable night. It's the closest thing to a hug you've had all day. The rain continues for 3 days. On the second day, one of the wagons gets stuck so deeply in mud that even with 4 extra teams of oxen, it can't be pulled free. The family has to unload everything, carry it forward through knee-deep mud, then take the empty wagon apart and reassemble it on firmer ground. It's a multi-day mud wrestling event, complete with grunting, cursing, and the squelching sound of utter despair. By the time the skies finally clear, the mood in the wagon train is grim. This is the reality of the Oregon Trail. Not a grand adventure, but a grueling test of endurance and hygiene, or rather, the complete lack thereof. But as the sun breaks through the clouds on the 4th morning, spirits lift. Clothes and blankets are spread out to dry. The trail begins to firm up. By afternoon, you've made 15 miles, a good day's progress. The air even smells cleaner, like wet earth and faint hope. That evening, someone brings out a fiddle again. The music starts hesitantly, then grows more confident. People gather, drawn by the cheerful sounds after days of misery. Soon there's dancing, not formal dances like back in town, but simple reels and jigs that anyone can join. You find yourself pulled into a circle dance by Miller's daughter, a girl about your age with freckles and a quick smile. The mud is forgotten as you spin and stomp, laughing at your own clumsiness. For a few hours, the hardships of the trail fade away. You're not pioneers facing an uncertain future. You're just people enjoying music and company under the vast prairie sky. And for once, you don't even care how much dust you're inhaling, or how much dried mud is caked to your pants. Indian territory, measles, and manhood. As May turns to June, the wagon train falls into a rhythm. Wake, eat, travel, make camp, sleep. The days blend together, marked only by changes in the landscape and the occasional landmark. You cross into what Mr. Davidson calls Indian territory. The land here doesn't belong to the United States. It's home to various tribes, some pushed west from their original lands. Everyone is more alert now, scanning the horizon for signs of danger. Your rifle feels heavier, your senses sharper. But the first Indians you encounter are peaceful. A small group approaches the wagon train, led by a man in a mix of traditional dress and white man's clothing. Through a translator, one of the scouts who speaks a little of their language, they offer to trade fresh meat for coffee and sugar. Your pa gives Ma a nod, and she brings out the trade goods she packed. The exchange is quick and respectful on both sides. That night, your family enjoys fresh venison instead of the usual salt pork, a welcome change from the endless beans. See, Pa says to you and Sarah, most Indians just want to trade, same as anybody else. You treat them fair, they'll treat you fair. You nod, but you notice he still keeps his rifle closer than usual that night. Trust, but verify seems to be Pa's motto, especially out here where everyone is on edge. As June progresses, the heat becomes intense. The prairie stretches endlessly, the grass now bleached yellow by the sun. Water becomes precious. Some days the only sources are muddy streams or stagnant ponds. The oxen are losing weight despite the abundant grass. The pace slows as Mr. Davidson insists on longer rest periods during the hottest part of the day. The air shimmers with heat, and every step feels like a monumental effort. Then, the fun really starts. Disease appears in the camp. Several children come down with measles, spreading quickly among the wagons. 2 of the youngest die and are buried by the trail, their small graves marked with stones and wooden crosses. Sarah catches it too, her face covered in angry red spots, her small body burning with fever. For 3 terrifying days, you watch Ma tend to her, bathing her with precious water to bring down the fever, praying over her at night. You take over driving the wagon so Ma can help with Sarah and Pa can focus on nursing her. It's like a nightmarish, unsanitary triage centre, and you're just praying you don't catch it too. On the fourth day, her fever breaks. The relief in your parents' faces makes your own eyes sting with tears you're too old to shed. You feel a surge of gratitude, and also exhaustion, like you've run a marathon just watching her. You're getting to be quite the wagon master, Pa tells you, his hand heavy on your shoulder. It's the closest he's come to saying he's proud of you, and frankly, the closest you've felt to being an adult who isn't just complaining about blisters. You've faced down illness, and somehow you're still standing. The Platte River and a hunting party. By the end of June, you've reached the Platte River. Unlike the Kansas, it's wide but shallow, more of a giant muddy puddle than a proper river. But it's still a milestone. You've travelled about 250 miles from independence, only about 1,750 miles to go. Piece of cake. A very, very large and dusty cake. The wagon train spreads out along the Platte, following its course west. The water isn't good for drinking, too silty, but the river valley provides a natural road west and water for the livestock. You're starting to understand why so many people just gave up and decided to live by a muddy river. One evening, as you're helping Pa with the oxen, Mr. Davidson rides up. "Benton," he says to your Pa, "I need your boy tomorrow. We're sending a hunting party out. Need someone quick and quiet to help drive the game." Pa looks at you, a question in his eyes. You nod eagerly. After weeks of walking beside the wagon, the chance for a different task, a man's task, is exciting, even if it involves hunting, which mostly just means chasing things into other people's gun sights. "He'll be ready at dawn," Pa tells Davidson. That night, you can hardly sleep. A real hunting party. You've helped Pa hunt back home, but this will be different. You'll be helping feed the whole wagon train. In the grey light before sunrise, you join the hunting party. 5 men and you, the only boy. They give you an old flintlock rifle that's almost too heavy to hold. Your job is to circle wide around any game they spot and drive it toward the waiting hunters. The day is long and hot, but exhilarating. You feel a thrill you haven't felt since leaving home, a real sense of purpose beyond just putting one foot in front of the other. By sunset, you've helped bring down 3 deer and a dozen rabbits. When you return to camp with the meat, you stand a little taller. For the first time, you feel like you're truly contributing to the journey, not just following along. You're practically a professional buffalo chaser, or at least a very determined rabbit herder. Fort Kearny, a glimmer of civilization, and mail. As the wagon train continues along the Platte, the landscape begins to change. The endless flat prairie gives way to more rugged country. In the distance, you can make out the first hints of hills, the beginning of the long climb toward the Rocky Mountains. The thought of climbing anything fills you with dread, but also a sense of progress. July finds your wagon train reaching Fort Kearny, a military outpost on the Platte. It's the first sign of white civilization you've seen in weeks, and the excitement in the camp is palpable. The fort itself is unimpressive, just some wooden buildings surrounded by a low wall, but to your eyes, after so long on the trail, it looks like a city. There's a small store where families can replenish supplies, mostly hardtack and disappointment, a blacksmith to repair wagon parts, and best of all, a post office where letters can be sent east. It's like finding an oasis in the desert, but instead of water, it's stationary. Your ma spends the evening writing a long letter to her sister back in Missouri. You add a few lines at the end, telling your cousin about the hunting trip and the Indians you've met. The letter will take months to reach them, carried east by military couriers and stagecoaches. Hopefully your cousin won't have forgotten who you are by then, or decided you died of dysentery and is already dividing up your old toys. The wagon train stays at Fort Kearny for 3 days. It's a welcome break from the constant travel. The oxen rest and graze on relatively fresh grass. People wash clothes in the river, a luxury, trade stories with other wagon trains, and enjoy the luxury of sleeping inside the fort's walls, safe from any potential dangers. It's a brief taste of normalcy, a chance to remember what life was like before every day was a battle against dust and exhaustion. But the trail beckons. Oregon is still more than 1,500 miles away, and summer won't last forever. On the 4th day, Mr. Davidson gives the order to move out. The wagons form their line once more and your journey continues. As July turns to August, the real challenges of the Oregon Trail still lie ahead. The easy part is over. Now come the mountains, the deserts, the hardest river crossings. The journey has already changed you. Your skin is dark from the sun, your hands calloused, your legs stronger than they've ever been. But the Oregon Trail will demand more from you yet. And in your heart, a question burns. Will it all be worth it when you reach the promised land of Oregon? Only time and copious amounts of suffering will tell the monotony and mud of August. The Platte River becomes your silent companion for the next several hundred miles. Unlike other rivers that cut through the land with purpose, the Platte sprawls lazily across the prairie, a mile wide and an inch deep, as the joke goes among the wagon trains. It's really more like a foot deep in most places, but still, you could practically walk across it if you didn't mind getting wet. And muddy. Very, very muddy. It's less a river, and more a very large, shallow, brown suggestion of water. August has settled in with brutal heat. The water in the Platte is too silty to drink, full of fine sand that'll tear up your insides. Instead, folks dig wells near the river, about 10 feet deep, where the water seeps in clearer after filtering through the ground. Your daily routine has solidified into something between misery and monotony. It's like Groundhog Day, but with more dust and less coffee. At 4 a.m., the night watchman fires his rifle to wake the camp. You hear your ma stirring immediately, the rustle of her dress as she crawls out of the tent. She's always first up, starting the morning fire before most folks have even opened their eyes. By 4:30 a.m., you're pulling on your boots. They're stiff from yesterday's mud, cracked from constant wetting and drying. Your feet have calluses on top of calluses now. When you started the journey, you had 2 pairs of boots. You're on your last pair now, and they're falling apart. Some folks have taken to wrapping their feet in rags when their shoes give out. Sounds delightful, like walking on a bed of raw, unadorned suffering. Sarah stirs in her blanket next to yours. "Already?" she mumbles. "Yep, Ma's making Johnny cakes. Better get up if you want some warm." The smell of cornmeal cooking on the skillet gets you moving. Ma works magic with the simplest ingredients: cornmeal, water, a pinch of salt, and a scrape of precious sugar when she's feeling generous. Everyone has the same basic supplies, but no one makes Johnny cakes like your ma. Hers are at least edible. By 5 a.m., Pa has rounded up the oxen from the night's grazing. They look thinner than they did in Independence, ribs starting to show through their hides, but they're still strong. You've seen other families lose oxen to exhaustion or disease. Without oxen, a family is stranded, dependent on the charity of others to continue. No oxen, no Oregon. That's the unspoken rule. Breakfast is quick. Johnny cakes with a strip of salt pork and bitter coffee that Pa and the other men gulp down like it's mother's milk. The beans are running low, so coffee is getting weaker by the day. Some families have taken to roasting prairie turnip roots as a substitute. Tastes like dirt, but at least it's hot. You've started to develop an appreciation for anything that isn't cold and hard. While you eat, you're already packing up. The tent comes down, blankets rolled tight, everything secured in the wagon. Nothing can be left loose, or it'll be bounced right out when the wheels hit a rut. At 7 a.m. sharp, Davidson fires his pistol in the air. "Wagons, ho!" The train lurches into motion, same as every day. The squeal of wheels and creak of wood, a familiar symphony of exhaustion. Today your family's rotation puts your wagon near the back. It's the worst position. You eat everyone else's dust, and if there's trouble up ahead, you're the last to know about it. So basically, all the downsides, none of the glory. Just more dust. The morning drive is always the best part of the day. The air still holds some coolness from the night, and the oxen move with purpose before the heat saps their strength. Sarah walks beside you for the first hour, playing a game where she tries to step only on your footprints in the dust. "You've got giant feet, Thomas," she giggles, stretching her legs unnaturally to match your stride. "All the better for walking to Oregon," you tell her, trying to sound heroic instead of just perpetually tired. By 10 a.m., the sun is high enough to start baking the land. Sarah's retreated to the small space on the wagon seat beside Ma. You keep walking, one foot in front of the other. Your thoughts drift as you walk. Back to Independence, forward to Oregon, sideways to nothing in particular. Sometimes you talk with John Miller, a boy about your age who walks beside his family's wagon. His pa was a blacksmith back in Ohio, and John knows all sorts of things about metal and fire. Other times you walk in silence, conserving energy in the growing heat, just trying to put one foot in front of the other without tripping. At noon, Davidson signals for the midday rest. The wagons form a loose circle, and the oxen are unhitched to rest in whatever shade they can find. It's too hot to cook, so lunch is hardtack. Rock-hard biscuits made of flour and water, baked until they'll last for months without spoiling. You dip yours in water to soften it enough to avoid breaking a tooth. Some days there's a bit of dried meat or cheese to go with it, but not today. The heat of midday brings an eerie stillness to the prairie. Even the insects quiet down, waiting for the worst to pass. The only sounds are the soft lowing of the oxen and the occasional cry of a baby from one of the wagons. Everyone moves slowly, saving their strength. Ma has taken to using this time to check Sarah's hair for lice, a constant battle on the trail where bathing is a rare luxury. Sarah squirms under Ma's fingers but knows better than to complain. You've seen what happens when lice get out of control. The Pearson family had to shave their daughter's head last month when they couldn't get rid of the infestation. That sounds like a fun new fashion trend for Oregon. Maybe they'll call it the prairie buzz. At 2 p.m, it's back on the trail. The afternoon stretch is the hardest, hot, dusty, and seemingly endless. The landscape barely changes, just the Platte River on your right and the prairie stretching to the horizon on your left. Occasionally, you'll pass the grave of someone from an earlier wagon train, a stark reminder of the trail's dangers. Some have proper markers with names and dates. Others are just mounds of earth already being reclaimed by the prairie grass. The most unsettling are the possessions abandoned along the trail. Furniture, trunks, even entire wagons, left behind when animals died or loads needed lightening. Back in June, these discards horrified everyone. Now they're just landmarks. 2 miles past the broken piano, someone might say when giving directions. It's a constant morbid reminder of those who didn't make it. Buffalo, dancing, and troubling news. Today's excitement comes around 4 p.m. when a scout rides back from the front of the train with news of a buffalo herd ahead. The wagons halt, while Davidson and the hunting party ride out. You wish you could go with them, but only the men with horses are chosen. They return 2 hours later with 3 buffalo bulls, already butchered into manageable pieces. Fresh meat is cause for celebration. Tonight, everyone will eat well. The smell of fresh meat is almost intoxicating after weeks of salt pork. Camp that evening is more animated than usual. The smell of roasting buffalo meat permeates the air. Families share their portions with neighbors, creating a patchwork feast. The Browns contribute wild onions they gathered along the trail. The Wilsons have a precious jar of pickles they've been saving for a special occasion. Even Mr. Davidson seems to relax a bit, accepting a plate from your ma with a rare smile. "Fine cooking, Mrs. Benton," he says. "Reminds me of home." It's a small compliment, but in this harsh environment it means a lot. After dinner, someone brings out a fiddle. Mr. Everett, a tall man with hands like hammers, cradles the instrument as gently as a baby and draws the bow across the strings. The music rises into the twilight air. "Oh, Susanna," a favourite among the travellers. People gather in the centre of the wagon circle, first just tapping their feet, then dancing in earnest. Pa surprises you by taking Ma's hand and leading her into a lively reel. You've never seen them dance before. Ma's cheeks flush pink, and she looks younger suddenly, like the girl she must have been when Pa first met her. Sarah tugs at your sleeve. "Dance with me, Thomas." Before you can protest, she's pulling you into the circle. You're clumsy at first, too aware of people watching, but the music works its way into your bones. Soon you're swinging Sarah around, both of you laughing. For a few precious hours, the hardships of the trail fade. You're not pioneers struggling toward an uncertain future. You're just people enjoying music and company under the vast prairie sky. And for once, you don't even care how much dust you're inhaling, or how much dried mud is caked to your pants. It's a fleeting moment of pure, unadulterated joy. But morning comes too soon, and with it, the familiar routine. The journey waits for no one. Chimney Rock and turning back. The terrain begins to change as August wears on. The flat prairie gives way to more rugged country. In the distance you can make out actual hills, the first real elevation change in hundreds of miles. The sight is both daunting and exciting, a sign that the landscape is finally changing. Chimney Rock rises from the plains like a beacon, visible for days before you actually reach it. It's a natural monument, a giant finger pointing towards the west, towards Oregon. "That's our halfway mark," Davidson tells everyone. "We've come about 1,000 miles, only 1,000 more to go." 1,000 more miles. The words should be daunting, but instead they fill you with a strange pride. You've already come so far. Surely you can make it the rest of the way. You're halfway to that free dirt, and hopefully a bath. Near Chimney Rock, your wagon train encounters another group heading east. It's unusual. Most traffic on the trail flows west this time of year. As they draw closer, you see their wagons are nearly empty, their animals thin, the people haggard. Their faces tell a story of defeat and desperation. Davidson rides out to meet their leader. They talk for a long time, too far away for you to hear. When Davidson returns, his face is grim. "They're turning back," he announces to the gathered families. "Got as far as South Pass before losing too many oxen to continue. They say the grazing gets worse the further west you go." A murmur runs through the crowd. South Pass is still hundreds of miles ahead, the gateway through the Rocky Mountains. If they couldn't make it, what does that mean for your train? "What else did they say?" someone calls out, the question tinged with fear. Davidson hesitates. They pass 3 other trains heading east, all turning back for the same reason, and they say the Sioux are restless this year, not happy with so many whites crossing their territory. Fear ripples through the group. Everyone's heard stories of Indian attacks, though your train hasn't seen anything but peaceful trading so far. The calm has been shattered. "We'll continue as planned," Davidson says firmly, trying to project confidence. "But we'll need to be more careful with our animals. Better grazing, longer rest periods, and we'll post extra guards at night." He's trying to reassure everyone, but the tremor in his voice is barely perceptible. That night, no one brings out the fiddle. The camp is quiet, each family huddled around their own fire, speaking in low voices. The joy of the buffalo feast seems very far away. Your pa sits cleaning his rifle with unusual care, checking every part, loading and reloading. "We'll be fine," he tells you and Sarah, though you haven't asked. Davidson knows what he's doing. He says it with a conviction he might not entirely feel. You nod, pretending a confidence you don't quite feel. The vastness of the country suddenly seems threatening rather than grand. So much empty space between here and Oregon. So many things that could go wrong. Like, I don't know, a river crossing where you have to build your own raft. Or worse, a fight you can't win. Rafting ahead, because walking isn't hard enough. The next day brings a new challenge, a river crossing. It's not the Platte itself, but a tributary that's swollen from recent rains upstream. Too deep to ford safely, according to the scouts. Davidson orders trees to be cut down to build rafts. The work takes all day, everyone helping to fell trees, strip branches, and lash the logs together with rope. It's back-breaking labor, but there's a grim determination in the air. By sunset, you have 3 sturdy rafts, each big enough to hold a wagon. Building your own transportation from scratch. Just another Tuesday on the Oregon Trail. You've become a reluctant carpenter. The crossing begins at dawn the next day. The air is cold and damp. The first wagon rolls onto a raft, its wheels chocked with stones to keep it from rolling. 4 men with long poles push the raft across the river, their muscles straining, their faces grim. Hello, dear listeners. Tonight, we're beginning with something a little less philosophical and a lot more, well, greasy. We're diving headfirst into the culinary and occasionally questionable delights served in Wild West saloons. Sure, they were known for whiskey, bar fights, and questionable piano music, but what did people actually eat there? Was it all beans and bacon, or were there surprises hiding behind those swinging doors? Perhaps an artisanal, farm-to-table, locally sourced rodent stew that would make even the most adventurous food critic from today's Romania blush. A question that keeps historians, and indeed anyone with a strong stomach, up at night. Before you get comfortable, and maybe a little hungry for something you probably shouldn't eat, do me a quick favour, like this video and subscribe if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It really helps more people find this particular brand of historical weirdness and encourages us to dig up more bizarre tidbits from the past. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Is it the middle of the night for you in Australia? Or just past breakfast in, say, Bucharest, perhaps enjoying a fresh Colac with your coffee? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft saloon-appropriate hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together, a journey that might just make you appreciate your modern refrigerator a little more. First thing that hit you when you walked into a Wild West saloon wasn't the piano music, usually off-key and played by someone who'd clearly had too much medicine, or the familiar sound of someone losing a week's wages at cards. Oh no, it was the smell. Forget the romanticized scent of sizzling steak and fresh cornbread, the kind you might find in a fancy restaurant in Cluj-Napoca, perhaps even with a charming rustic ambiance. The real bouquet was more like a punch to the nostrils, a dizzying concoction of odours that assaulted your senses, a complex blend of sweaty cowboys who hadn't seen a bath in weeks, wet tobacco that clung to everything like a second skin, old beer that had spilled and fermented into a pungent carpet, damp wood that groaned with the weight of years of neglect, horses that hadn't bathed in a decade and left their distinct equine aroma clinging to everything, and if you were lucky, the faintest, most ephemeral hint of something cooking in the back. A truly intoxicating mix that probably kept the less determined customers at bay. Some saloons, in a desperate attempt at civility, tried to mask this olfactory assault with fresh sawdust on the floor, hoping it would absorb some of the grime and odour, or with pipe smoke thick enough to cause temporary memory loss, a smoky haze that made the air so opaque you could almost chew it. Others, however, simply embraced it, treating the unique saloon scent as part of the establishment's character. "You don't come here for the air, stranger," barkeeps would say with a knowing wink, nonchalantly slapping flies off the counter with a rag that hadn't been cleaned since the Civil War. A rag, I might add, that likely pulled triple duty as a fly swatter, a dishcloth for cleaning glasses, and perhaps even a napkin for particularly brave or desperate patrons. It was a multifunctional piece of cloth, truly. And yet, somehow, in every dusty, dimly lit and notoriously pungent establishment, from Dodge City to Deadwood, there was always a kitchen. It might have been a rudimentary hole-in-the-wall fire pit with a single, perpetually bubbling pot of beans over embers, sending wafts of bean steam into the already thick air. It might have been nothing more than a grumpy woman in a soot-covered apron, her face etched with years of heat and hardship, stirring a cauldron of mystery stew with a spoon that doubled as a self-defense weapon against unruly customers. Or, more realistically, aggressive rats vying for a share of the culinary delights. But food was being made somewhere, by someone, and if you could actually smell it through the thick layers of sweat, tobacco and whiskey vapour, you were halfway to dinner. That is, if you could find a seat, which was often a challenge in itself, a silent battle for a piece of splintered wood. Most saloons weren't laid out like modern restaurants with cosy booths, mood lighting, and polite waiters asking about your dietary restrictions, or whether you prefer sparkling or still water. Oh no, the Wild West was far more direct. There were no servers politely asking if everything was to your satisfaction, no menus with scripted fonts and enticing descriptions, unless "Eat or Starve" scrawled on a dusty chalkboard in barely legible chalk counts as a font choice. Just a few splintered tables, rickety chairs that looked like they'd lost a fight with a buffalo and were still limping, and one long, scarred counter where you could eat, drink, argue, or all three in rapid succession, often with complete strangers breathing down your neck and occasionally bumping elbows with you. If you were a regular, the cook might bellow something like, "Beans or stew, you varmint?" and you'd shout back your choice without looking up, perhaps with a grunt of approval or a weary sigh, depending on your hunger. If you were new in town, an uninitiated greenhorn, they'd stare you down with a calculating gaze, trying to guess whether you were going to pay or pass out before the plate even hit the table. And let's be honest, in a world where passing out from exhaustion, intoxication, or sheer hunger was a common pastime. Guessing correctly was a crucial skill for a saloon owner looking to turn a profit. And that's what made saloon dining so special, so uniquely authentic. It wasn't about taste, it was about pure, unadulterated survival. You ate what they had, not what you wanted, because want was a luxury the harsh frontier simply didn't cater to. You sat shoulder to shoulder next to strangers who might rob you blind or heroically save your life tomorrow, depending on their mood, the outcome of their poker hand, and the state of their whiskey consumption. The stakes were always high, and if the food made you sick, well, that's what whiskey was for. A quick swig, a hearty cough that rattled your bones, and you were ready for round two, or at least a good night's sleep on the notoriously unsanitary floor. It was a cycle of sustenance and self-medication, a frontier ritual. In the undisputed hierarchy of Wild West cuisine, beans sat squarely at the top, a veritable king among culinary commoners, a humble monarch reigning supreme over the meagre offerings. Not because they were delicious, let's not be delusional here, this wasn't fine dining, but because they were cheap, incredibly indestructible, and could survive an apocalypse, a chaotic gunfight, and a thundering stampede without breaking a sweat, emerging remarkably unscathed. Pinto beans, black beans, navy beans, whatever brownish dried legume they could get their hands on that resembled something edible, it didn't matter. If it was dry, vaguely edible, and could be boiled into submission with enough effort, it ended up in the pot. Beans were the unsung heroes of saloon kitchens, the workhorses of the frontier diet served morning, noon and night, often to men who hadn't seen a fresh vegetable since they left Kansas, or perhaps even before that, lost somewhere in the annals of forgotten dietary history. Preparation was remarkably simple, a testament to efficiency and practicality in a world where time was as precious as gold dust. Step 1. Pour beans into a massive iron pot, the kind that probably weighed more than a small horse. Step 2. Boil them for 6 hours, or sometimes even longer, depending on the cook's patience and the consistency of the fire, over a questionable smoke-filled fire, stirred occasionally with a stick that may or may not have been previously used for propping open the saloon door or stirring a vat of lye. Step 3. Serve them unceremoniously with a side of dubious salt pork, a stale biscuit, and a look of mild apology from the cook, who likely knew deep down that this wasn't exactly a Michelin star meal. Some cooks, feeling particularly ambitious, or perhaps just trying to mask the natural, rather bland flavour of the beans, might try to get fancy, adding copious amounts of lard for extra calories, and a glossy sheen, a few scarce onions if they were lucky enough to trade for them, or even a precious dash of chili powder, if they were fortunate enough to acquire such exotic spices from a passing merchant. But most didn't bother. Complexity was a luxury. In the Wild West, flavour was often considered a luxury, a frivolous indulgence, and any seasoning was whatever blew in from the open window. Usually dust, sometimes a small tumbleweed, adding an earthy, gritty texture. Beans were hearty, incredibly filling, and delightfully predictable, 3 traits that cowboys respected more than a vein of pure gold. They fueled long cattle drives under the scorching sun, providing sustained energy for arduous journeys. They powered intense poker nights where fortunes were won and lost with astonishing speed. And they gave you something, anything, to chew on while you waited for the piano player to start again, or to finally stop, or for someone to get tossed through the front window, a surprisingly common and much anticipated form of nightly entertainment. The only downside, the aftermath. One cowboy eating beans was tolerable, if a little aromatic, creating a localized atmospheric disturbance. 10 cowboys in a saloon full of beans, however, was, frankly, a biological weapon, a noxious cloud of silent but deadly gases. It's said that some bar fights weren't started by insults, cheating, or spilled whiskey, but by a single, silent but deadly betrayal near the stove, leaving a lingering, undeniable question mark in the air and igniting a brawl. Still, beans were utterly dependable. When the meat ran out, when the chickens fled, or were eaten by aforementioned mysterious stews, and when the cook had exactly 7 brain cells left from the whiskey fumes, the beans remained, unbothered, unburnt, unchanged, a monument to culinary stoicism and resilience. Some cowboys even preferred them, a testament to their practicality. They could be eaten cold, reheated endlessly, and, in a desperate pinch, even used as makeshift currency in emergencies, traded for small favours or essential supplies. Legend has it, a man once bought a horse with 3 pounds of salted beans and a solemn promise never to return to that particular town, a transaction that speaks volumes about the value placed on these humble legumes. So yes, saloon food had its highs and lows, its moments of dubious delight and outright disgust. But beans... Beans were the baseline, the bedrock, the humble gaseous heartbeat of 1,000 dusty meals, a constant in a chaotic world. You didn't love them, you respected them, and sometimes in the harsh, unforgiving reality of the frontier, that was more than enough. If beans were the robust and gassy soul of Wild West saloon cuisine, then salt pork was its slightly greasier, perpetually resilient backbone, a slab of fat and meat so tough it could survive a thunderstorm, a brutal bar brawl, and 6 months rattling around in a saddlebag without changing texture or losing its unyielding character. This wasn't the gourmet pancetta you might find in fine Roman restaurants today, carefully cured and subtly flavoured. Oh no. Salt pork wasn't bacon, though cowboys loved to pretend it was as they gnawed on it with determined jaws and hopeful expressions. It was pork belly, heavily salted and often smoked, then painstakingly preserved in massive barrels with enough brine to season a small ocean. The salt, the unsung hero of preservation, kept it from rotting, and also, arguably, from being truly edible in a palatable sense. Cooked right, a rare and almost mythical occurrence spoken of in hushed tones, salt pork was tolerable, even surprisingly good. Fried up in a screaming hot skillet, served crispy and sizzling, it had flavour, glorious grease that coated your insides with a comforting film, and that satisfying crunch that made you briefly forget the rest of your dinner came from a can labelled Mysterious Contents, use at your own risk. But cooked wrong, which, let's be honest, happened with alarming frequency, often due to a cook's haste or sheer indifference. It was like chewing a salted boot heel dipped in axle grease, a true culinary challenge for even the most desperate and hungry. It was a test of willpower and jaw strength. Still, salt pork, in its own unique way, had its devoted fans, primarily due to its sheer practicality and calorie density. It was easy to transport, incredibly hard to ruin, though many a cook dedicated their life to trying with varying degrees of success, and gave even the blandest pot of beans a salty punch of joy, or at least a compelling reason to drink more whiskey to wash down the lingering taste. Cooks in saloons were masters of frugality. They wasted absolutely nothing. The rendered fat, a golden elixir, was a precious commodity, used to fry everything from potatoes to biscuits, lending a unique flavour that was 90% grease, 10% regret, and 100% vital calories. The rind, that tough, chewy outer layer, was tossed into stews for added flavour and texture, or, in moments of extreme cruelty or misguided generosity, given to unsuspecting dogs, or to unlucky newcomers who didn't know the difference. One bite and they'd learn real quick that the barkeep wasn't joking when he said, "Chew slow or choke proud," a lesson learned through gastronomic suffering. Salt pork was remarkably versatile too, a true culinary chameleon. It could be diced into beans, slapped unceremoniously on biscuits, fried alone as a greasy, salty snack, or gnawed at like jerky on long rides, slowly but surely wearing down your molars. Cowboys packed it like treasure, knowing it was the ultimate insurance policy against starvation, a guaranteed source of calories, and saloon cooks leaned on it heavily when the chickens ran off or the stew pot got too thin, providing a much-needed boost of flavour and substance. It wasn't elegant, and it sure wasn't healthy by any modern medical standard, but in a world where you might ride 60 miles across a desolate prairie before your next hot meal, salt pork got the job done, and if you survived it, well, you were definitely stronger for it, perhaps even immune to lesser culinary affronts, your digestive system a fortress. In the vast and unforgiving landscape of the Wild West, stew was the great culinary equalizer, hot, vaguely meaty, and deeply, profoundly suspicious. It was the one thing almost every saloon served, no matter how ramshackle the kitchen, how dubious the ingredients, or how many rats were seen scampering across the floor, often considered extra protein if you were desperate. Why? Because stew was the perfect cover story for whatever odds and ends the cook had lying around, whatever culinary scraps could be salvaged, or, more accurately, whatever ingredients couldn't legally be described to a paying customer without inciting a riot. The base was remarkably simple, a testament to culinary ingenuity born of necessity, a large pot, a roaring fire, and a generous dose of ambition, or utter desperation. You started with water, perhaps some beans or potatoes if they were available, and then you tossed in whatever hadn't walked away yet, whatever meat could be scrounged. Beef? Sure, if you were lucky enough to have it. Rabbit? Definitely. Squirrel? Yep, a common and often surprising addition. Rattlesnake? If it wasn't biting anymore and had a decent enough chunk of meat, toss it in. One intrepid traveller once claimed he found a bootstring in his bowl, a piece of old leather stewing in the pot. He wasn't even mad, he said, with a wry grin and a weary sigh. It was the most chewable part, a testament to the toughness of frontier meats. Meat quality varied wildly, making each bowl of stew a true gastronomic roulette, a roll of the dice. Some stews, in rare moments of grace, had tender chunks of beef from the local butcher, a culinary treat to be savoured. Others, well, they had meat, the kind you didn't ask about, the kind that might have a faint, unsettling odour that lingered in the air. If the cook looked particularly nervous, avoiding your gaze, and the local dog population had recently decreased, you just ate around the chewy bits, swallowed hard, and prayed for a quick digestive journey, hoping for the best. Vegetables, when available, were usually boiled into oblivion, stripped of all colour, texture, and nutritional value. Carrots became orange smudges, barely recognisable. Onions disappeared completely, their presence only hinted at by a faint, tear-inducing vapour that tickled your nose. Potatoes, the hardiest of the bunch, held on the longest, bravely resisting the heat, but eventually surrendered, becoming soft, bland lumps that dissolved on the tongue. The result? A bubbling brown-grey slurry that smelled way better than it looked, a low bar to be fair, and tasted better than you'd expect, assuming enough salt was thrown in to mask all other, less desirable flavours. Spices were a luxury, a mythical concept almost. Most stew got its kick from whatever was on the cook's hands or knife, and given the prevailing hygiene standards, that could be a lot of flavour. If you got black pepper, a truly rare commodity, you were in a fancy place, probably one with actual tablecloths and maybe even a separate dining area. If you got chili powder, a fiery indulgence, congratulations. Your sinuses were about to be cleared by force regardless of any existing congestion, a truly invigorating experience. But despite the mystery, the dubious ingredients, and the often unappealing appearance, stew was comfort food for the weary cowboy. It was hot, it was filling, and it could be stretched endlessly by just adding more water, a true culinary magic trick that made a little go a long way. One pot might feed a dozen men, or be reheated 3 days in a row, until it developed the consistency and personality of old glue, stubbornly refusing to be eaten, yet still providing sustenance. You didn't eat stew because it was delicious. You ate it because it was there, because it was warm, and because nothing else in town was edible unless you liked chewing tobacco and regret. Just remember, never ever ask what's in it. Because in the Wild West, ignorance wasn't just bliss, it was dinner, and sometimes a matter of self-preservation, ensuring you finished your meal without too many unsettling questions. Not every cowboy could afford a steak. In fact, most couldn't, unless they just struck it rich in a gold mine, or won big at the poker table. But nearly every saloon, regardless of its size or reputation, had something bread-like to soak up the ubiquitous stew, or simply to provide a few precious calories to keep a man going. That something usually came in one of two distinct forms: soft, flaky biscuits that were heavenly when fresh, a rare and fleeting joy, often spoken of in hushed, reverent tones, or hardtack, which was basically bread's undead, unyielding cousin, a flat, hard cracker that defied decay. Let's start with the biscuits, those glorious, buttery creations. When done right, which again was rare but utterly magical, like finding a unicorn in the desert. They were warm, buttery, and flaky enough to convince a man he'd stumbled into a proper kitchen, perhaps even one from a bygone era of culinary excellence. Cooks who could consistently make good biscuits were local legends, revered almost as much as a sharpshooter or a trustworthy farrier. Some claimed their secret was copious amounts of lard, rendering them delightfully greasy and rich. Others swore by buttermilk, lending a subtle tang and a tender crumb. A few probably just had lucky hands, an uncanny knack for dough, and extremely low standards among their clientele, who were simply grateful for anything warm and edible. These biscuits were best served alongside beans or stew, used to mop up whatever broth hadn't burned your tongue off with its fiery heat. They were often made in cast-iron pans, baked over open flames in the saloon's humble kitchen, and served with a suspicious chunk of butter that might have seen better days, or a generous splash of molasses if the place was truly fancy and had a consistent supply of such a sweet luxury. And then there was hardtack, a slab of flour and water, utterly devoid of yeast or leavening, baked until it could survive a nuclear winter, a meteor impact, and the apocalypse with unwavering structural integrity. Originally made for soldiers and sailors enduring long, arduous voyages, it found its way west thanks to one simple, undeniable fact. It never went bad, practically defying the laws of nature. It also barely qualified as food, more of a dietary challenge, a test of fortitude. Eating hardtack required strategy, patience, and a jaw of pure steel. First, you'd inspect it for weevils, which wasn't a deal-breaker for many, merely an added crunch that some cowboys surprisingly enjoyed, considering it extra protein. Then, you'd embark on the arduous process of soaking it in stew, coffee, or whiskey until it softened. This could take anywhere from 10 minutes to 2 presidential terms, or until your patience finally ran out and you simply gave up. Even after prolonged soaking, chewing hardtack was a monumental commitment. You didn't just eat it, you grappled with it, a primal struggle between man and baked goods, a battle of wills. Dentists, had they existed in abundance and been affordable in the Wild West, probably made a small fortune off cowboys, who challenged a piece and lost a tooth in the process. But here's the crucial thing. Both biscuits and hardtack, in their own unique ways, served their essential purpose. They were cheap, making them accessible to even the most cash-strapped cowboy. They were portable, easy to carry on long journeys. They filled you up, providing crucial energy to keep a man going for hours. And in a world where calories mattered more than cuisine, where sheer survival trumped culinary delight, that was enough. So, if you strolled into a dusty saloon and saw a plate of steaming biscuits, you counted your blessings, perhaps even offered a silent prayer of thanks to the culinary gods. If they handed you a hardtack puck the size of your palm, well, at least it came with a story and maybe a chipped tooth, a badge of honor in the rough and tumble West. You learn to appreciate the simple things. If you think modern coffee from your local cafe in Bucharest is strong, expertly brewed and served with artistic flair, try cowboy coffee. A brew so potent it didn't just wake you up, it stared back, challenged your very existence, and dared you to blink first, often leaving you wide-eyed and slightly trembling. Coffee in the Wild West was less about nuanced taste and more about pure, unadulterated survival, a necessary jolt to face the day. It wasn't roasted by origin, meticulously filtered through fancy gadgets, or topped with oat milk foam art and a dusting of cinnamon. Oh no, it was ground roughly, or often not at all, just whole beans thrown in, dumped unceremoniously into a kettle and boiled until the liquid turned black, viscous, and vaguely sentient, like a dark force gathering strength within the pot. The standard recipe, passed down through generations of weary cowboys, prospectors, and weary travellers, went something like this. Take water from whatever source you had, hopefully not downstream from the horses, though sometimes that was unavoidable, adding an authentic flavour. Throw in a handful of coffee grounds, measured not by a precise spoon but by instinct, aggression, and the sheer desire for a kick. Boil it hard, with no gentle simmering or delicate temperature control. Don't strain it. Don't question it. Just pour and pray that it doesn't spontaneously combust in your tin cup. The result? A thick, dark concoction that smelled like burnt dreams and tasted like vengeance, or perhaps just very strong bitter mud with a distinct mineral tang. It wasn't uncommon for the last sip to contain more grounds than liquid, which meant cowboys got both caffeine and fibre in one heroic gritty gulp, a 2-in-1 dietary supplement. And yet, despite its crude preparation and formidable taste, they loved it. Coffee kept you warm on cold desert mornings, its heat radiating through your very bones, a comforting warmth against the biting wind. It kept you awake through endless night watches, guarding against rustlers and restless livestock, sharpening your senses. It masked hangovers from questionable whiskey and helped digest even more questionable stew. It was fuel, comfort, and a form of liquid punishment, all in one battered tin cup. Saloons didn't always serve coffee unless they had a dedicated kitchen and a cook brave enough to brew it. But if they did, it came out boiling hot, probably old from sitting on the stove for hours and strong enough to strip paint off a barn door. A truly formidable beverage. One grizzled cowboy, after taking a bracing swig, described it as like drinking a kick from a mule, but you miss it when it's gone, a sentiment many shared. Fancy folk might have added a lump of precious sugar or some canned milk if available, but everyone else just grimaced and powered through, accepting their fate as part of the daily grind. And if a saloon had been reheating the same pot all day, letting it stew and concentrate, you'd get the boldest brew known to man, thick as tar, twice as resentful, and capable of making your teeth hum with its sheer potency. It's worth noting that some cooks, in a desperate attempt at economy and resourcefulness, reused old grounds to stretch the pot even further. This economy method led to coffee that tasted like disappointment and regret, a truly soul-crushing brew, but it still counted as coffee. Because in the Wild West, you didn't drink coffee for pleasure. You drank it to feel alive, to stay alert, and to simply stay that way, one burning, gritty sip at a time. In the vast and unforgiving landscape of the Wild West, meat wasn't just food, it was currency, a profound status symbol, and occasionally a direct test of bravery. If you were a truly fortunate soul who had just struck it rich in a gold mine, or won big at the poker table, you might walk into a saloon and confidently order a steak, a grand gesture of newfound prosperity. What you got, however, depended entirely on luck, timing, and whether the cook held a personal grudge against your face, or, more likely, simply didn't care about your culinary preferences. Steak, in theory, was a luxury, a rare treat. In reality, it was often a tough, sinewy, overcooked slab of beef that had been fried in a pan with generous amounts of lard until it was scorched into unyielding obedience and served with exactly zero garnish or accompanying vegetables. If you dared to ask for it medium rare, an unheard of concept, the cook would likely just stare at you with a greasy ladle in hand, a silent but intimidating challenge, until your moustache wilted from sheer intimidation and you quickly rescinded your request. When fresh beef wasn't available, and let's be brutally honest, it usually wasn't, unless you were practically standing next to a freshly butchered steer still warm from the kill, saloons turned to other, more preserved options, embracing necessity. Dried jerky, so tough it could double as shoe leather for a particularly resilient boot. Salted buffalo, a massive undertaking, but a significant source of meat, occasionally appearing on the menu. Venison, if a skilled hunter had passed through, or even wild boar if someone had gotten incredibly lucky on a hunt. And by lucky, we mean managed to hit it and drag it back before the buzzards or coyotes did their job. In mining towns or far-flung settlements, where fresh supplies were rarer than a sober gambler on a Saturday night, meat offerings got significantly more creative. Squirrel stew, rattlesnake roast jackrabbit with seasoning, which often meant dust and a general lack of identifiable flavour. If it had legs and didn't belong to a customer's horse, it was generally considered fair game for the pot. Sometimes you were served meat, and no one, not even the cook, told you what it was. That was a subtle but clear sign to eat quietly, not ask inconvenient questions, and simply accept your fate, whatever creature had ended up on your plate. If you chewed too long, your jaw aching, or, God forbid, found something resembling a whisker, a suspicious bone fragment, or an unexpected claw, you just sipped your whiskey, nodded solemnly, as if you understood, and accepted your fate. There was also the pervasive risk of age. Some meats had been hanging around long enough to earn names from the regulars, becoming almost legendary in their longevity. Cooks would meticulously slice off the truly bad rotten parts, drown the rest in copious amounts of thick gravy, and confidently tell you it was well aged, or aged to perfection, a culinary masterpiece of endurance. If your plate twitched slightly when you poked it with a fork, a faint, unsettling tremor, you were entitled to one single raised eyebrow and nothing more. Complaining was ill-advised unless you fancied a quick, involuntary exit to the dusty streets outside via the front window, or a confrontation with a very large, very angry cook wielding a cleaver. Still, in those rare, precious moments when the meat was truly fresh and the cook wasn't entirely drunk or distracted, you might get a real meal, a sizzling slab of beef, perhaps a fried egg on top, its yolk still runny, and maybe a tender biscuit on the side, a rare, glorious plate that reminded you why people endured gunfights, train robberies, and endless days on the trail for such simple pleasures. It was a fleeting moment of culinary bliss, a taste of civilization, but most of the time you ate what was there, hoped it didn't eat you back, and counted your blessings that it was, at the very least, warm, filling, and, mostly, non-lethal. In a Wild West saloon, pie wasn't really a dessert in the modern sense, the kind you might find artfully arranged in a pastry shop in Sibiu. It was more of a happy accident, a rare, glorious result of a cook with spare ingredients, a functioning oven, a luxury in itself, and a tiny sliver of mercy in their hardened heart. But if there was one reliable sweet comfort, a glimmer of culinary joy amidst the dust and grim reality, it was cornbread, made from simple cornmeal, water or milk, lard, of course always lard, and sometimes a dash of baking powder if the cook remembered and had access to it. Cornbread was the Swiss Army knife of the frontier menu, incredibly versatile and adaptable. It could be baked in pans, fried in skillets, or even dropped by spoonfuls directly into boiling stew if someone was in a hurry, or exceptionally lazy and wanted to make a dumpling of sorts, adding another layer of mystery to the stew. Alone, a simple slice of cornbread was often dry, crumbly, and only slightly sweet, depending on who made it and how generous they were with the precious sugar, if any. It was always best served fresh, meaning, in most cases, it was almost never fresh, often having sat on the stove for hours, cooling and hardening. More often, you'd get a wedge that had been sitting near the stove since sunrise, hardened like a miner's conscience after a particularly lucrative gold strike, capable of chipping a tooth if you weren't careful. But here's where the magic, the true alchemy of the frontier kitchen happened. Molasses. A dark, sticky, syrupy miracle that transformed even the driest, most unappealing slab of cornbread into something just shy of glorious, a genuine delight. It was the cowboy's frosting, the outlaw's drizzle, the lonely gambler's last bit of joy before losing everything on a bad hand of poker. Molasses was affordable, kept remarkably well in the heat of the arid climate, and most importantly, masked the sins of even the driest baked goods. If a saloon had a barrel of it, you were truly in luck, a fortunate soul indeed. If they warmed it before serving, a rare act of hospitality, you were practically eating at a 5-star establishment by frontier standards. A true culinary luxury. Some cooks, feeling inspired and perhaps a little adventurous, would go a step further, pouring molasses over skillet-fried cornbread and tossing in a pinch of salt or spice, creating a delightful sweet and savoury combination. It wasn't quite cake, but it felt like it if you'd been chewing jerky and hardtack all week, your taste buds longing for any semblance of sweetness or richness. Cornbread with molasses became the default dessert, the go-to sweet treat, quick, cheap, filling, and just sweet enough to calm your nerves after a rough ride or a close call in the poker room. No elaborate icing, no whipped cream, no fancy frills, just grit, grain, and gooey, unadulterated satisfaction. And for many, in the unforgiving expanse of the Wild West, it was more than enough, a small but significant comfort in a hard world. Because when your life involved endless cattle drives, choking dust storms, and the occasional shootout, dessert didn't need to sparkle. It just needed to remind you that not everything in the West was trying to kill you. If you were lucky enough to stumble into a saloon before noon, preferably sober, not bleeding, and with enough coins to jingle convincingly in your pocket, you might have been offered eggs and chicken. And if so, you were in the presence of a true miracle, or more likely a cleverly laid trap disguised as breakfast. Let's start with the eggs. Fresh eggs in the Wild West were gold. Not actual gold, mind you, but nearly as rare and equally fragile, prone to cracking under the slightest pressure. Chickens weren't raised for fun. They were cranky, prone to wandering off and getting lost, and occasionally stolen by desperate rustlers, eaten by various predators, or simply lost to foxes. If a saloon had eggs on hand, they either had their own resilient flock of chickens, a rare sight, a remarkably reliable local supplier, even rarer, or a secret smuggling operation from the next town over, risking life and limb for a carton of fragile ovals. What kind of eggs were they? Hopefully chicken, possibly duck, maybe something else entirely. You learned very quickly not to ask too many pointed questions about your food sources. You ordered eggs, and what you got depended entirely on the cook's mood, the egg's actual age, and the phase of the moon, which some believed influenced their freshness. Some were scrambled to disguise colour, texture, and perhaps a faint unsettling aroma. Others were fried until the yolks turned to leather, hard and unyielding discs, and if it wobbled slightly when it hit your plate, a subtle, ethereal quiver that was a clear sign from the universe to order whiskey instead, and quickly, to drown your sorrows. As for chicken, it was on the menu, a rare and coveted item, but not often actually available. If the menu, or chalkboard more likely, said fried chicken, what you'd probably get was a scrawny bird that died angry, tough, bony and fried in lard, until every last drop of flavour tapped out, leaving behind a bland, chewy husk. Chicken wasn't always worth the effort of chewing, but it was meat. It was hot. And it wasn't beans again, so folks ate it gratefully, often gnawing directly off the bone with a quiet, determined desperation. You might get a drumstick the size of your thumb, a meagre offering, or, if you were truly blessed by the culinary gods, a whole quarter roasted on an open flame, its skin slightly singed but gloriously crispy. You might also find a feather in your gravy, a charming, authentic touch that was just part of the frontier experience, a reminder of the origins of your meal. Breakfast offerings of eggs and chicken were a distinct status symbol for saloons. They proudly proclaimed, "We have food that didn't come from a can or a barrel that was buried for 3 months and then dug up." If the eggs were warm and the chicken wasn't bone dry, you'd tell your buddies for weeks, regaling them with tales of culinary luxury and frontier hospitality. And if it gave you food poisoning, well, that was just the West reminding you who was in charge. A gentle nudge from destiny, a lesson in humility. Still, there was something hopeful about ordering eggs. They meant morning. They meant survival. And just maybe they meant you'd live to drink again by nightfall. Perhaps even enjoy another round of mystery stew. Your stomach now fortified against all manner of culinary assaults. In any Wild West saloon that dared to serve food, a truly enigmatic, often shadowy and perpetually smoke-covered figure existed whose power rivaled that of the bartender, the sheriff, and even the sternest town preacher combined. The cook. This individual, often unshaven, always irritable, and perpetually covered in a fine sheen of grease and sweat, was either a life-saving culinary genius who could conjure a meal from thin air, or a gastronomic war criminal who could turn a simple meal into a memorable trauma. There was absolutely no comfortable middle ground. You'd never see them smile, their faces often set in a permanent scowl, but you'd definitely remember their cooking for days, either in profound gratitude for sustenance or agonizing gastrointestinal trauma that made you question all your life choices. Saloon cooks weren't formally trained chefs with delicate French techniques or even a basic understanding of food safety. Oh no. They were usually ex-miners who couldn't swing a pickaxe anymore, their bodies broken by the harsh labour. They were ex-cons looking for a way to stay out of trouble, or at least out of jail, their past murky and best left unexamined. Or they were simply ex-somethings who knew how to build a fire and weren't afraid of questionable meat, a crucial skill in the frontier. Their kitchen was a rudimentary, often chaotic affair, a flickering fire pit, a dented cast-iron stove that looked like it had survived a cannonball strike, and a single, mighty cast-iron pan that hadn't been washed since the California gold rush, its surface a testament to layers of hardened grease and forgotten meals. And yet, somehow, against all odds, They managed to feed entire saloons full of hungry, often unruly, and frequently desperate men. On a good day, a truly exceptional day when the stars aligned and the cook was in a benevolent mood, they'd whip up a pot of chili that could bring a man to tears, in a good way, of course, from the spices and warmth. The biscuits would be warm, flaky, and surprisingly tender. The beans would be cooked through, no longer rock hard, and the cornbread just sweet enough to remind you of a distant, perhaps idealized home, a faint whisper of comfort. But on a bad day, and there were many bad days, often dictated by the cook's hangover, the beans were scorched, sticking stubbornly to the bottom of the pot. The meat was a uniform, unappetizing grey, and the stew had an unsettling, oily layer that actually moved when the pot was still, an ominous sign. You didn't complain. You absolutely couldn't. Saloon etiquette was crystal clear, a cardinal rule: never, under any circumstances, insult the cook. Because the cook controlled everything: the salt, the grease, the mystery meat ratio, and your very sustenance. If they liked you, you got the freshest cut of whatever meat was available, a true privilege. If not, you got the spoon scrapings from last night's disaster, reheated into a horrifying chili surprise that would haunt your dreams for weeks. These cooks also often doubled as the saloon's unofficial bouncer, a formidable presence. No one in their right mind wanted to get hit by a ladle that had just survived frying a pound of salt pork, or worse, stirring a week-old stew. And if the cook had a cleaver, which many did, always kept ominously close at hand, glinting in the dim light, they could clear a room faster than a shotgun blast, simply by a menacing glance and a heavy footfall. Despite their perpetually foul moods, their distinct lack of social graces, and their undeniably questionable culinary methods, these cooks were vital. They kept cowboys on their feet, prospectors from passing out from hunger, and weary travellers from collapsing mid-sentence. They worked long hours in suffocating heat and smoke, took insults of seasoning, and lived by a single, unwavering rule: if you don't like it, there's the door, or the whiskey. So, whether they were your gastronomic saviour or your culinary saboteur, you always nodded respectfully to the cook, perhaps even muttered a quick "thank you." Because in the Wild West, they held your stomach and your fate in their greasy, glorious hands. Now that we've walked through the swinging doors, sniffed the dubious stew, and stared down a pickled egg floating ominously in a foggy jar, the real, burning question remains: would you actually eat the food served at a Wild West saloon? Let's be brutally honest. Our modern taste buds, accustomed to the delicate flavours of a Romanian mixi or a perfectly seasoned sarmal, lovingly prepared, might not survive the experience. The beans were basic, often unseasoned and endlessly repetitive. The meat was a gamble, often questionable and rarely tender. And the stew, oh, the stew was more mystery than meal, a culinary enigma wrapped in a brown liquid. You'd need strong teeth, a stomach made of iron, and the kind of ravenous appetite that comes from riding 40 miles across a sun-baked prairie on a sunburned horse with nothing but dust in your lungs. But here's the crucial thing. For the cowboys, miners, gamblers, and misfits of the American frontier, saloon food wasn't about gourmet flavour, artistic plating, or Michelin stars. It was about pure, unadulterated fuel. It was about calories to keep you going. It was about warmth to ward off the chill of the desert nights. It was about a warm plate between gunfights, train robberies, or another night sleeping uncomfortably in a barn next to a mule named Regret. It was, quite simply, about survival. You didn't ask where the meat came from because you probably didn't want to know. You didn't complain if the biscuit crumbled like chalk in your mouth, leaving a dry, powdery residue. You just sat down, ate what was handed to you with grim determination, and washed it down with something strong enough to kill bacteria, or at least make you stop caring about it, which, frankly, was equally effective. And when food was good, when the beans were surprisingly fresh and perfectly cooked, the coffee didn't bite back with a vengeance, and the cook had spared a little precious molasses for the cornbread. It felt like a genuine miracle. A fleeting moment of deliciousness in a hard, unforgiving world. It was a taste of civilization, a reminder that not everything was a struggle. So, would you eat it? If you lived back then, yes. You wouldn't just eat it. You'd be profoundly thankful for it. perhaps even shedding a tear of gratitude. You'd scrape the bowl clean, leaving no trace, wipe the plate with your crust of bread, or hardtack if you were truly unlucky, and order seconds with coins that still smelled suspiciously of dynamite and horse sweat. You'd laugh with strangers, perhaps curse the cook under your breath, but never to their face, toast with whiskey that burned like a prairie fire, and maybe, just maybe, end the night with a slice of pie and a story worth telling. Because saloon food wasn't glamorous, it was gritty, greasy, and undeniably real. And in a world where the West was still wild, untamed and relentless, that was more than enough to keep a man going. Perhaps it makes you wonder what culinary innovations will emerge from the necessities of our own future, doesn't it? Hello there, fellow night owls, early birds, and anyone currently existing in that mysterious in-between time. Welcome to tonight's extended play, Deep Dive Waltz Back in Time. I'm so glad you've joined me for another journey into the past, where we'll be exploring a fascinating, often overlooked and, frankly, sometimes darkly funny slice of Victorian life. Tonight we're talking about something most history books kind of gloss over, probably because they're too busy detailing royal wardrobes or the thrilling exploits of men with giant sideburns, the lives of women who worked in Victorian brothels. I know, sounds weird for a bedtime story, right? Like, and then Goldilocks went to the Three Bears house, and it was actually a gentleman's club in Soho. But honestly, it's a surprisingly human, remarkably resilient, and utterly compelling story about real women just trying to survive in a world that wasn't exactly handing out free opportunities. No judgment here, folks, just historical curiosity with a dash of wow, I'm glad I wasn't there. Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. It's the digital equivalent of dropping a shilling in my historical research hat, and it helps these forgotten voices reach more ears. And I'm super curious where you're all listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. It always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world. Are you in a futuristic pod in Tokyo, a cozy cabin in the Canadian wilderness, or maybe just hiding from your responsibilities in a closet in Ohio? Either way, you're my people, and I'm honoured to be your guide through the historical shadows. All right, find that cozy spot. Get nestled in, take a nice, slow breath, and just let your body sink into whatever you're lying on. We're heading back to Victorian London, specifically 1857, the absolute peak of the era, where smog was basically a fashion accessory, everyone had consumption, and social hypocrisy was an Olympic sport. Trust me, you're going to be real grateful for that mattress by the time we're done. You might even hug your pillow. A chilly dawn in Haymarket. So, congratulations! You just woke up in London, 1857. It's early morning, maybe 5 or 6, and you're definitely not in some fancy 4-poster bed with satin sheets. Oh no, you're lying on a slightly lumpy horsehair mattress with a thin woolen blanket pulled over you. The sheets aren't fresh. They're changed once a week at best, which frankly was probably more often than some actual respectable households. They carry the faint, valiant scent of cheap lavender water that doesn't quite mask the mustiness beneath. It's doing its best, bless its heart, like a tiny, floral-scented superhero battling a legion of less pleasant aromas. The room is chilly. Coal for the small fireplace is strictly rationed, especially in the morning hours. You'd think with all the coal London was burning, turning the skies a perpetual shade of Dickensian grey, they'd have enough for everyone, but apparently even basic warmth was a luxury. The walls are covered in faded floral wallpaper, peeling slightly at the corners where dampness has seeped in, giving the room that charming, abandoned, haunted dollhouse aesthetic. There's a persistent smell that hits your nose, a mixture of coal smoke from thousands of chimneys, London's signature perfume, a bold blend of industry and grime, the nearby Thames with its distinct aroma of mud and sewage, Eau de Grimy River, a particularly potent vintage, and something sweeter and more chemical, the perfumes and cosmetics that are tools of the trade here. It's like a Victorian potpourri of desperation and desperation masking, all mingling in a strangely atmospheric cocktail. You're in a room at the back of a brothel in the Haymarket area of London. Not the worst establishment, not by a long shot. You're not in some dank, disease-ridden hovel where the floorboards might actually try to bite you. but certainly not one of the high-class ones either, where gentlemen with actual titles might stumble in, half drunk, thinking they're getting a discount duchess or perhaps a genuinely intellectual conversation. You share this small room with another woman. She's still asleep on the other narrow bed, her breathing deep and steady. Shifting slightly, you feel the springs of the mattress creak beneath you, groaning like an old man getting out of a pub chair after a particularly long session. You stretch your legs, pointing your toes, feeling that tension and then the relief as you relax again. Ah, that's nice. Just taking a moment before the day begins, before the reality of Victorian existence punches you in the face. Outside, London is already awake. You hear the clip-clop of horses' hooves on cobblestones, the rattle of cartwheels and the first street vendors beginning their calls. "Fresh bread," someone shouts. From a few streets away, the voice echoing between the tall, grimy buildings. "This is your life. Mary, they call you here, though that's not the name your mother gave you. That one you keep tucked away like a precious, slightly bruised secret. You've been at this house for nearly 2 years now, which makes you something of a fixture, practically furniture, perhaps with a better story than the armoire. You've seen girls come and go. Some moved up to better houses. The ones with slightly less lumpy mattresses and maybe indoor plumbing, a true luxury. Some disappeared back to the soul-crushing poverty they came from. Some fell ill and never recovered. It's a revolving door, but not the kind with fancy doormen. More like a turnstile to a very uncertain future. You sit up slowly, letting the blanket pull around your waist. The floorboards are cold against your bare feet as you reach for the woolen shawl hanging on the bedpost and wrap it around your shoulders. Nice and snug. That feels better. On the small table between the beds sits a chipped ceramic pitcher and basin. The water inside has a thin film of ice on top. Oh, winter in London is brutal, an absolute joy. It's the kind of cold that feels like it's actively trying to get inside your bones and set up a permanent residence. You break it with your finger, the cold water stinging your skin before splashing your face. The shock of it fully wakes you, your breath catching for a moment before steadying again. It's a natural alarm clock, far more effective than any annoying bell, more like a swift, icy slap to consciousness. The path to Haymarket. Now let's talk about how you ended up here, in this room, in this life, because the story might not be what you'd expect. You weren't kidnapped or sold into this work as a child, though tragically, that did happen to some girls, especially the very young ones. Basically baby-faced bargaining chips in a brutal economic game. You weren't seduced and abandoned by some cad of a gentleman, left pregnant and destitute, though that too was a common enough tale, the Victorian equivalent of being ghosted after a bad date, but with significantly more life-ruining consequences. No, your path was more mundane, more representative of how most women found themselves in this profession. You were a seamstress, a good one, with nimble fingers and a keen eye for detail. You could sew a button on a moving train in a hurricane, probably, and make it look perfectly respectable. But there were hundreds of women like you in London, thousands even, all competing for the same poorly paid work. The British Quarterly once noted that, compared to the drudgery of a dressmaker's apprentice, factory work was mere play. And they weren't wrong. You would work 14, sometimes 16 hours a day, straining your eyes in poor light, which, let's be honest, was probably just a single flickering gas lamp. Your fingers cracked and bleeding in winter. And for what? Starvation wages that barely kept a roof over your head. You were literally stitching your fingers raw for enough money to buy half a potato and maybe a spoonful of gruel. The grim irony was that you were making beautiful clothes for ladies who would never dream of acknowledging your existence, let alone the conditions in which their finery was produced. You lean back against the wall now, feeling its solid support behind you, taking a deep breath. You roll your shoulders, feeling some of the tension release. Ah, that's better. Just easy and relaxed now. You remember the turning point clearly. It was winter 3 years ago. You hadn't eaten in 2 days. The room you rented was unheated, and you could see your breath misting in the air as you worked frantically to finish a commission that might pay enough for a week's lodging. Your fingers were so numb you kept pricking them with the needle, leaving tiny spots of blood on the fine white linen. decorating it with your own despair. It felt like every stitch was draining a piece of your very soul. A girl you knew, Jane, came to visit. You'd worked together once. She looked different now, healthier, better fed, wearing a wool dress that, while not fashionable by upper-class standards, was clean and warm and well-made. She brought food, actual hot food, a meat pie still steaming in its wrapping, and sat with you while you devoured it, trying not to seem as desperate as you felt. Jane waited patiently, like a wise, slightly better-fed oracle, observing your ravenous consumption without judgment. "There's a place," she said finally, her voice low but clear. "A house off Haymarket. The madame is strict, but fair. No funny business, no cruelty. 2 meals a day and a decent bed. Medical checks weekly." She paused, watching your face, letting the words sink in. "You'd make in a night what you make in a week here, Mary, and you wouldn't be killing yourself with this." She gestured at the pile of sewing, a silent accusation against the brutality of your current existence. You didn't answer right away. You'd been raised properly in a God-fearing home. The thought of this other path was both terrifying and utterly alluring. But your parents were dead, your brothers scattered to the wind seeking work, and here you were, slowly starving to death, one stitch at a time. The weight of that memory settles over you, and you feel yourself sinking a little deeper into the mattress, your breathing slowing naturally, in and out just like that. Sometimes the choice isn't between right and wrong, but between bad and worse, and that meat pie smelled really, really good. It was the smell of survival, and for a hungry woman, that aroma trumped any moral qualms, morning rituals and shared dreams. The house is starting to wake up around you. You hear footsteps on the stairs. Heavy ones. Probably Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper, a woman whose footsteps alone could probably scare a rat into submission, and whose frown could curdle milk. There's the clatter of coal being shoveled, a fire being lit downstairs in the parlour where the customers wait. The scent of coffee drifts up. Real coffee, not chicory. This house prides itself on small luxuries. It's the little things that make a difference, apparently, even in a house of ill repute. Your roommate stirs, mumbling something in her sleep before turning over. "Lily," she's called here. She's younger than you by a few years, maybe 19 to your 24. With auburn hair that the gentleman seemed to fancy, probably because it reminded them of some romantic painting. She came from a factory in Manchester, she told you once. The noise of the looms had made her partially deaf in one ear. So, you had a hard life. Now it's a slightly less hard, slightly louder life, but at least with better food. Time to get up properly. You have routines to follow, expectations to meet. Mrs. Winters runs a tight ship, and tardiness isn't tolerated. The madam, Mrs. Cartwright to her face, though the girls call her Carty when she's not around, probably with a roll of the eyes and a conspiratorial giggle, expects everyone downstairs and presentable by noon. The brothel operates on a precise schedule. Mornings are for cleaning, bathing and rest. Afternoons see a few regular customers. Businessmen on extended lunch breaks, mainly, probably while trying to sneak in a quick meeting before heading back to the office, smelling faintly of cheap cologne and desperation. Evenings and nights are the busiest times, with the house often full until the early hours. It's basically a very specific kind of highly scheduled customer service job, but with far more sequins and significantly less pension. But now, in this quiet morning moment, you take your time. You reach for the tin on the bedside table and remove the small lump of beeswax inside, warming it between your palms. You then smooth it over your chapped lips. Another small luxury. Mrs. Cartwright insists that the girls take care of themselves. "You're selling an illusion, girls," she often says, probably with a dramatic flourish of her hand and a knowing wink. Gentlemen don't want to see the reality of a working woman's life. You find yourself nodding slightly at the thought. Good advice, really. Most of the men who visit don't want reality, they want fantasy, escape, something different from their respectable wives and homes, something that makes them feel special or powerful or simply seen. And you, Mary, are very good at providing that very particular brand of escapism, even if it feels like a hollow shell of yourself. Standing up, you stretch fully, arms reaching toward the low ceiling, feeling the pleasant pull in your muscles. Your nightgown, a simple cotton affair, Nothing like the silk and lace confections you wear for work falls around your ankles as you move to the small wardrobe. During the day, when not entertaining, you wear ordinary clothes, a simple dress, practical shoes, nothing that would mark you out as different from any other working woman on the streets of London. That's important. While brothels themselves aren't illegal, public solicitation is. The police generally leave established houses alone, especially those that pay the expected bribes, a necessary cost of doing business apparently. But discretion is still necessary. You select a dark blue dress, slightly faded but well mended, and lay it on the bed. Getting dressed is a slower process than it will be later, when you might need to change quickly between customers. Now, you can take your time, enjoying the routine of it. Stockings first, then petticoat, then corset. Not tightly laced during the day, just enough to provide structure. As you dress, you think about the day ahead. Tuesday is usually quiet. There might be a few regulars in the afternoon. Mr. Phillips, the bank clerk who visits every other week and mainly wants to talk about his stamp collection. You're pretty sure you know more about philately than he does now, and you could probably write a monograph on the subtle differences between penny blacks. Or perhaps the nervous young man who gives his name as Smith and never stays longer than 15 minutes. You suspect his mother still packs his lunch and he's just there for the mild thrill of transgression. You even have a name for him in your head, Mr. 15 Minutes. Outside, the sounds of London grow louder as the morning advances. A group of children run past below the window, their shrill voices rising above the general din. A dog barks somewhere nearby. A street vendor begins his melodic call. Knives to grind. Knives to grind. The normality of it all still sometimes strikes you as strange. This life, this work that society condemns as the ultimate female degradation, happens right alongside ordinary London life. The baker delivers fresh bread to the brothel just as he does to the respectable boarding house next door. The coalman, the iceman, they all come and go, providing the same services they provide to any household. It's almost domestic, in its own peculiar, morally ambiguous way. You sit back down on the edge of the bed, taking a moment just to breathe, in through your nose, out through your mouth, nice and easy. That's it. There's a quiet knock at the door. "Hot water, miss," comes a voice. Young Betsy, the maid of all work. She's only 13, too young for the house's main business. Mrs. Cartwright took her in when she found her begging on the street, half-starved. Now she helps the housekeeper, runs errands, and sleeps in a tiny room off the kitchen. In a few years, she'll likely join the other girls, but for now she's protected, which is more than can be said for many children on London's streets. "Come in, Betsy," you call. The door opens and the girl enters, carrying a large jug of steaming water. Her face is freshly scrubbed, her brown hair neatly braided. "Morning, Miss Mary," she says cheerfully, pouring the hot water into your basin. "Cold one today," Mrs. Winters says. "Might be snow later." "Thank you, Betsy," you say, giving her a smile. "Had your breakfast yet?" "Yes, miss. Cook made porridge with treacle. There's coffee in the kitchen if you want some, and fresh bread too. This is another thing that makes this house better than some. Regular meals, decent food. In the worst brothels, girls might go hungry if business is slow or be fed scraps barely fit for consumption. Here, Mrs. Cartwright understands that healthy girls earn more money. It's an investment really in her product. A well-fed girl is a more appealing and therefore more profitable girl. Betsy leaves, and you wash properly with the hot water, enjoying the warmth on your skin. The routine is soothing. Face first, then neck, arms under your arms, and finally a quick rinse of your most intimate areas. Full bathing happens twice a week in this house, Wednesdays and Sundays, in the copper tub that's brought into the kitchen. It's more frequent than many respectable working-class women manage, actually. Cleanliness was often a luxury, not a given. Once washed, you feel more human, more prepared to face whatever the day brings. You run a comb through your hair, dark brown, thick, reaching halfway down your back when loose. For daytime, you twist it into a simple knot at the nape of your neck. Later for work, you'll style it more elaborately, perhaps with the artificial hairpiece that adds volume and curls, turning you into a more polished, less just woke up and ready for coffee version of yourself. There's a small mirror propped on the dresser, its silver backing spotted with age. You check your reflection briefly. Your face is looking better than it did in your seamstress days. Regular food has filled out the hollows in your cheeks, added a healthier colour to your skin. Your eyes, though, they've changed. More guarded now, more watchful. You've seen things, know things, that the innocent girl from the countryside never imagined. You shake off the moment of reflection. No use dwelling on such thoughts, they only bring a quiet ache. Instead, you focus on finishing dressing, lacing your boots with practiced fingers, each movement precise and familiar, settling into the rhythm of the task. Your breathing naturally slows in and out, steady and calm. The day's rhythms and lingering dreams. Fully dressed now, you're ready to face the day. Your first task will be breakfast, then helping with the general cleaning of the house. Each girl has assigned duties. Yours include dusting the parlour and polishing the glasses in the small bar area. Mrs. Cartwright believes idle hands lead to trouble, so even when not entertaining customers, the girls are kept busy. It prevents boredom, which can lead to arguments, or worse, introspection. Lily finally stirs properly, sitting up with a yawn. "Morning," she mumbles, pushing her tangled hair from her face. "What time is it?" "Just past 7, you tell her. "Plenty of time yet." She nods, stretching her arms above her head, her young body still limber and unburdened by years of hard labour. "Had that dream again," she says, her voice soft. "The one about the seaside. Have you ever been, Mary?" "To the sea. Once," you say, remembering a rare family outing years ago. "Brighton, when I was small." The memory is hazy, a sun-drenched blur of salty air and distant ships, a world away from the perpetual grey of London. "I'd like to go some day," Lily says, her voice wistful, almost a whisper. They say the air is different there, cleaner, that you can breathe proper. This is a common dream among the girls, saving enough to escape London, to start fresh somewhere else, away from the grime and the judgments. Some manage it, most don't. The money that seems so good compared to other women's work still slips away. Some to lodging and food, some to clothes and necessities for the job, some to small comforts and luxuries that make the life bearable. It's a cruel trick, enough to survive, but rarely enough to truly escape. "You will," you tell her, though you're not sure you believe it yourself. "Keep putting something aside each week, even just a shilling. It adds up." She nods, but you both know how hard it is to save. There's always something. A toothache needing treatment, a dress torn beyond mending, a friend in desperate need. Life has a way of consuming whatever small buffer you try to build. You feel a moment of heaviness at the thought, then consciously let it go. Your shoulders drop slightly as you exhale. That's better. Just easy now. "I'll see you downstairs," you tell Lily, who's finally getting up. "Don't be too long. Mrs. Winters was stomping about earlier, and you know what that means." "She's in a mood," Lily agrees with a grimace, pulling her shawl tighter. "I'll hurry." You leave the room, closing the door quietly behind you. The narrow hallway is dimly lit with worn carpet running its length. There are 4 other bedrooms on this floor, all similar to yours. Downstairs are the public rooms, the parlour where customers are received, a small dining room, the kitchen, and servants' quarters at the back. The best bedroom, reserved for Mrs. Cartwright's personal use, is on the ground floor, allowing her to monitor comings and goings, like a spider at the centre of its web. The house itself is narrow but tall, squeezed between similar buildings on a side street. It's respectably maintained on the outside, with clean curtains in the windows and a freshly painted door. Nothing identifies it as a brothel. There's no red light, no obvious sign. Customers know to come here through word of mouth, through discreet advertisements in certain publications, through the network of cab drivers and hotel porters who receive commissions for directing gentlemen this way. It's all very discreet, like a secret handshake for gentlemen of a certain persuasion, hidden in plain sight. As you descend the stairs, the smell of coffee grows stronger, mingling now with baking bread and frying bacon. Your stomach rumbles in response. The wooden stairs creak slightly underfoot, a homely, familiar sound. You run your hand along the banister, feeling its smoothness from years of similar touches. The house is warming up now, as fires are lit in the main rooms. That persistent London chill is retreating, at least within these walls. You can hear the housekeeper's voice from the kitchen giving instructions to the cook. the normal domestic sounds of any household beginning its day. And for now, in this moment, it could almost be any house, any life. There's a rhythm to the morning that's soothing in its predictability, a pattern that carries you forward, one step at a time, through each day. You feel your body settling into that rhythm, your breathing matching its gentle pace, in and out, easy and calm. You pause at the bottom of the stairs, taking a moment just to be. Your muscles feel loose and comfortable, your mind quiet. Despite everything, there's a certain peace in this moment, in the simple fact of being alive, of having survived another night in a city that devours so many. The kitchen door is open, warm light spilling into the hallway. You can see the cook at the stove, her broad back turned to you as she works. Betsy is setting the table in the corner where the servants and girls eat together. Mrs. Winters is reading a letter, her spectacles perched on her nose, her grey hair neatly tucked under a cap. An ordinary scene, a moment of calm before the complex dance of the day begins. You take a deep breath, filling your lungs completely, and then release it slowly, your shoulders dropping, tension flowing away like water. You're ready now. You step forward into the kitchen's warmth, into the mingled scent of coffee and bread and wood smoke, into the quiet chatter of the beginning day. There's bacon frying in the pan, its rich aroma making your mouth water slightly. Your stomach gives another little rumble of anticipation. "Morning, Mary," says the cook without turning around. She has an uncanny ability to identify each person by their footsteps. It's practically a superpower, probably honed by years of listening for trouble. "Sleep well?" "Well enough," you answer, moving to help Betsy with the table settings. The routine of it is comforting, the familiar weight of the plates, the precise arrangement of the cutlery. Your hands move automatically while your mind drifts, pleasant and unfocused. Outside, London continues to wake. A church bell rings in the distance, marking the hour. Voices call in the street. Vendors, neighbours, children. The endless symphony of the city rises and falls like breath, in and out, like waves at that seaside lily. Dreams of visiting, rising and falling. A gentle rhythm that carries you along as you sink deeper into the familiar patterns of the day, your body relaxed and comfortable, your breathing steady and slow as you move around the warm kitchen, helping prepare for breakfast with the others. The smell of fresh bread grows stronger as the cook takes a loaf from the oven, its crust golden brown and crackling slightly as it cools. The kitchen table is large and rectangular, scarred with years of use. 8 chairs are squeezed around it, enough for the 5 girls currently working in the house, plus Mrs. Winters, Betsy and cook. Mrs. Cartwright takes her meals separately in her private sitting room, maintaining the distance that she believes necessary for proper management. You slip into your usual chair, feeling the smooth, worn wood beneath you. The seat has been polished by years of use, shaped by countless bodies before yours. There's something comforting about that continuity, that shared experience across time, a silent testament to all the women who have sat here before you, just trying to get through another day. You settle in, feeling the solid support beneath you. Cook brings over a large pot of porridge, setting it in the centre of the table with a satisfying thud. It's good porridge, thick and creamy, made with milk rather than water, sweetened with a spoonful of treacle. Another of the small luxuries that marks this house as a cut above the most basic establishments. "Eat up while it's hot," Cook says, her broad face flushed from the stove's heat. She's a widow in her 50s, came to work here after her husband's death left her destitute. Never comments on the nature of the business, just cooks and keeps to herself. She believes good food is the foundation of health, a sort of culinary Hippocratic oath. You help yourself to a generous bowl, the steam rising in fragrant curls. The first spoonful is hot and sweet on your tongue, the texture smooth and comforting. You close your eyes briefly, just enjoying the simple pleasure of good food when you're hungry. The other girls filter in gradually. First Emily, a petite blonde who's been here about 6 months, still sometimes looking a little shell-shocked by the whole experience. Then Sarah, older than most at nearly 30, with a no-nonsense attitude and a surprising talent for numbers. She helps Mrs. Cartwright with the accounts, proving that even in a brothel, a good accountant is invaluable, especially when dealing with creative expenses. Last is Josephine, the newest, still adjusting to the life, her eyes often red from private tears. Lily finally appears, hair hastily pinned up, still looking half asleep. She slips into the chair beside you just as Mrs. Winters begins serving the coffee. "Nearly missed breakfast," you murmur, passing her the porridge pot. "Worth it for an extra 10 minutes in bed," she whispers back with a small smile. The coffee here is another luxury. Real coffee, not the chicory substitute that most working-class households make do with. It's strong and hot, sweetened with sugar for those who want it. You cradle the cup in both hands, feeling its warmth seep into your fingers. Nice and cosy. The rich aroma rises with the steam, rich and slightly bitter, a proper start to the day. Breakfast is a mostly quiet affair. There's an unspoken rule against discussing business this early. Instead, the conversation drifts to ordinary topics. The weather, a funny story about the butcher's delivery boy slipping in the alley yesterday. Speculation about whether the greengrocer's wife is expecting again. London's favourite spectator sport. Normal conversation, everyday matters. The kind of talk that happens around thousands of breakfast tables across London every morning. This normality is important. A reminder that despite the nature of the work, this is also just a place where people live, eat, sleep, and go about their daily business. You feel yourself relaxing into this ordinary moment, your shoulders dropping slightly, your breathing deep and even. The food settles warm in your stomach, providing energy for the day ahead. You take another sip of coffee, savouring the rich bitterness, and for a quiet moment, the outside world and its judgments fade away. Chores, cleanliness, and quiet contemplation. After breakfast, the day's chores begin. The house runs on a strict schedule, with specific tasks assigned to each girl, not just for efficiency, but because Mrs. Cartwright believes that routine and responsibility help maintain order and prevent the chaos that plagues less well-run establishments. It prevents boredom, which can lead to arguments, or worse, introspection. Today, your morning duties include dusting the parlour and polishing the glasses in the small bar area. Simple, repetitive tasks that allow your mind to wander while your hands stay busy. There's something meditative about such work. The regular motion, the gradual transformation from dusty to clean, dull to shining. It's the zen of Victorian housekeeping, just with more dust motes and existential dread. The parlour is the main public room of the house where customers are first received. It's decorated in a style that might be called respectable with hints of luxury. Solid furniture in dark wood upholstered in red velvet that's slightly worn at the arms but still plush. Heavy curtains in a matching shade tied back during the day to admit what little London sunlight filters through the perpetual haze of coal smoke. A few carefully chosen paintings on the walls, landscapes mostly, with one mildly suggestive classical scene featuring draped nymphs. Nothing too obvious, nothing that would immediately identify this as a brothel to a casual observer. That's deliberate. Maintaining a veneer of respectability protects everyone. If a police officer did enter, there would be nothing immediately incriminating to see, just a private home with several young women in residence. Suspicious perhaps, but not definitively illegal. It was all about plausible deniability, a cornerstone of Victorian morality. You begin your dusting, working methodically around the room. Feather duster first for the larger surfaces, then a slightly damp cloth for the more detailed work. The familiar motions are soothing, requiring just enough attention to keep your mind occupied without demanding deep concentration. As you work, you can hear the house around you. Mrs. Winters instructing Betsy on the proper way to black the kitchen range. A very serious business, apparently, worthy of military precision. Cook humming tunelessly as she kneads dough for the day's bread. Lily's light footsteps overhead as she makes the beds. Ordinary domestic sounds that could belong to any household. The mantelpiece holds several ornaments. A china shepherdess, a small brass clock, a pair of decorative urns. You dust each carefully, replacing them in exactly the same positions. Mrs. Cartwright notices if things are moved even slightly. She has an eye for detail sharper than any needle. The clock ticks steadily, marking the peaceful morning rhythm. Through the window you can see a slice of London life. A maid beating a rug in the small yard behind the house next door. A cat picking its way fastidiously along a garden wall. A boy running with a message clutched in his hand. You move to the small bar in the corner of the room. It's not elaborate, just a cabinet containing glasses and a few bottles of spirits. Most customers are offered a glass of sherry or brandy when they first arrive, a social nicety, a way of easing the transaction. The glasses need polishing. They develop a film in London's sooty air even when not used. You take each one, breathing gently on it before rubbing with a soft cloth in circular motions. The glass makes a soft squeaking sound as it comes clean, reflecting the dim light and gleaming facets. The repetitive motion is almost hypnotic. Round and round. Your breathing naturally synchronizes with the movement, in as you begin the circle, out as you complete it. Slow and steady. Your hands know just how much pressure to apply, enough to clean effectively without risking breaking the delicate crystal. Time passes peacefully as you work. The morning light shifts gradually, painting slow-moving patterns on the floor. Your mind drifts to pleasant, undemanding thoughts. The afternoon ahead, the book you're slowly reading in your spare moments. Dickens' latest, borrowed from Sarah, who gets them from a customer who owns a bookshop. A true luxury, those circulating libraries. The new ribbon you might buy for your hair if business is good this week. Simple thoughts, immediate concerns. You've learned not to dwell too much on the past or worry too far into the future. This life teaches you to exist primarily in the present, to take each day, each hour, each moment as it comes. It's a survival mechanism, a way to keep your sanity when the world outside feels like it's trying to chew you up and spit you out. The sound of the front door opening and closing brings you back to full awareness. Heavy footsteps in the hallway, a man's tread. Then Mrs. Cartwright's voice, pitched lower than she uses with the girls, her tone professional but welcoming. "Good morning, Doctor. Thank you for coming so promptly." It's Wednesday, medical examination day. Every week the doctor visits to check the girls for signs of disease. It's one of Mrs. Cartwright's strictest rules and one of the reasons her house maintains its reputation. In many brothels, disease runs rampant, with devastating consequences for both the women and their customers. Here, any girl showing symptoms is immediately removed from work and treated. Expensive in the short term, but ensuring the long-term viability of the business. After all, healthy girls are profitable girls, and a good reputation meant repeat business from gentlemen who valued their own health, and discreet reputation. You finish polishing the last glass, setting it carefully in place. The doctor's arrival means a change in the day's rhythm. Examinations will take most of the morning, conducted in Mrs. Cartwright's private sitting room, converted temporarily into a consulting room. Each girl will be seen individually, the results recorded in a small notebook that Mrs. Cartwright keeps locked in her desk, probably next to a stack of IOUs and her secret stash of chocolate. You return the polishing cloth to the kitchen, where Mrs. Winters is now supervising Betsy's efforts at vegetable preparation. Carrots and onions are being chopped for the midday stew, their fresh, earthy scent mingling with the yeasty smell of rising bread dough. "Parlour's done," you tell Mrs. Winters. "Shall I help here until the doctor's ready for me?" She looks up from inspecting Betsy's knife technique. "No need. He's seeing Josephine first, then Lily. You've time for your washing if you want." Personal laundry is done individually, each girl responsible for her own intimate items. The laundress comes only for sheets, towels, and larger pieces. So, once a week, usually on Wednesdays, before bathing, you wash your personal things, the cloths used for monthly courses, undergarments, stockings. You collect your basket from the small cupboard off the kitchen and carry it through to the scullery at the back of the house. It's cooler here, with a stone floor and a large sink. You pump cold water into a copper basin, then add a kettle of hot water from the range to take the chill off. The physicality of washing is satisfying, the rhythmic movement of hands in water, the transformation of soiled to clean. You work methodically, rubbing soap into the fabric, working it with your fingers, rinsing thoroughly. The water turns cloudy, tiny soap bubbles catching the light in rainbow colours. This quiet, necessary task gives you time to think. The doctor's visit always prompts reflection. It's a reminder of the risks of this life, the diseases that can ravage a woman's body, bringing pain, disfigurement, and eventually death. You've seen it happen to others. A persistent cough that gets worse, not better. Suspicious sores that don't heal. the telltale signs that mean a girl will soon disappear from the house, usually to one of the charitable hospitals if she's lucky, or to suffer alone if she's not. So far, you've been fortunate. Careful. Mrs. Cartwright insists that certain precautions are taken with all customers. Not foolproof, but better than nothing. And the weekly examinations catch problems early when they can still be treated. Still, you know this luck cannot last forever. Few women survive more than a few years in this profession without contracting something. It's a calculated risk, weighing the certainty of starvation in more respectable work against the possibility of disease in this one. It's a grim calculus, but a necessary one, a silent bargain you make with yourself every day. You wring out the last piece, a cotton chemise, twisting it firmly to remove excess water. The muscles in your forearms flex with the motion, a pleasant sensation of strength and capability. Your hands, despite the harsh soap and water, are still relatively soft and smooth. Another necessity of the work. Customers don't want to feel calloused hands on their skin. Carrying the damp laundry, you head out to the small yard behind the kitchen. A clothesline stretches from the house to a post near the wall, and you hang your things carefully, using wooden pegs to secure them against the breeze. The air is cold but dry, good drying weather if the threatened snow holds off. The yard is tiny, just a small rectangle of flagstones with a few struggling plants in pots, but it's open to the sky, and after the confines of the house you take a moment just to breathe the outside air. It's not fresh by any rural standard. London's atmosphere is always tainted with smoke and fog, but it's cooler and cleaner than inside. You tilt your face up, feeling the weak winter sunlight on your skin, a rare moment of pure physical pleasure, asking nothing of you, just the sensation of light and air. Your breathing deepens naturally, your chest expanding more fully. That feels good. Just taking a moment for yourself, a brief stolen breath of something akin to peace. The back door opens and Lily pokes her head out. "Doctor's almost done with me. You're next," she says. Then, noting your upturned face, "Anything interesting up there in the sky?" You smile, lowering your gaze. "Just the usual. Sun, cloud, freedom." She snorts softly, understanding the half-joke. "Well, come in before you freeze. Mrs. Winters is heating water for tea, and Cook's made those currant buns you like." The promise of warm food and drink is tempting after the cold yard. You follow Lily inside, feeling the heat of the kitchen envelop you like an embrace. The contrast makes your skin tingle pleasantly as circulation returns to your chilled fingers. The kitchen is the heart of the house, the warmest room where everyone gravitates in their free time. Now, with midday approaching, it's busy with food preparation. Cook stands at the large table rolling out pastry for a meat pie, her strong arms dusted with flour to the elbows. Mrs. Winters sits in the corner chair that's unofficially hers, darning a stocking with tiny, precise stitches. Betsy moves between them, fetching, carrying, learning by observation and instruction. You accept a mug of tea from Lily, wrapping your hands around its warmth. The steam rises, carrying the comforting aroma of tea and the promise of a warm currant bun. And for a moment, just a moment, the world outside this kitchen, outside this house, fades away. Midday and the gentleman call. After your medical checkup, which is as impersonal and brisk as always, you return to the kitchen. The doctor, a portly man with tired eyes and a surprisingly gentle touch, gives a curt nod to Mrs. Cartwright, confirming that you, along with the others, are fit for business. It's a relief you feel deep in your bones, a weekly reprieve from the spectre of illness. Back in the kitchen, the currant buns are indeed warm and delicious, a buttery, sweet counterpoint to the savoury porridge. The atmosphere is relaxed, a brief truce before the evening's performance begins. The girls linger over their tea, chatting about inconsequential things, a new novel someone is reading, a particularly irritating customer from last night, speculation about a new bonnet seen on a respectable lady in the street. This camaraderie, these quiet moments of shared humanity are precious. You are all in this together, navigating a world that often sees you as disposable. Your bonds are forged in shared experience, a silent understanding that transcends words. Lily is telling a story about a gentleman who kept asking her to recite poetry. even offering extra payment for particularly long or obscure verses. He seemed more interested in my memory than anything else, she says with a giggle, though I made sure to pretend otherwise. Sarah rolls her eyes playfully. That's nothing. I had one who insisted on playing chess, claimed it stimulated the mind before anything else. You all laugh, a genuine sound that briefly fills the kitchen with warmth. The absurdities of their customers are a frequent source of amusement, a way to reclaim some dignity from the transaction. By early afternoon, the house shifts gears. The more rigorous cleaning of the morning is done. Now, it's about preparation for the evening. You might take a short nap if the previous night was particularly long, or perhaps read a few chapters of your book. The quiet reading hours are a sanctuary, a mental escape into other lives, other worlds, where women might choose their own destinies. You often wonder what it would be like to be a heroine in one of those novels, making grand decisions, falling in love instead of merely surviving. As the afternoon wears on, a few early customers begin to arrive. These are typically the regulars, men who prefer the quieter hours, perhaps seeking companionship more than anything else. Mr. Phillips, the stamp collector, might appear, his face flushed slightly from the brisk London air. He's harmless, almost sweet in his earnestness about his hobby. You guide him to the parlour, offer him a glass of sherry, and settle in for another lesson on the intricacies of postal marks. He pays well for your undivided attention, and you've learned to genuinely feign interest in the various monarchs depicted on the tiny squares of paper. It's an easy income, a pleasant diversion, and you don't have to work too hard to earn it. Other callers might be nervous young men, perhaps on their first visit to such an establishment. They stumble over their words, eyes darting around the room, clearly terrified of being caught. You handle them with gentle professionalism, putting them at ease, knowing that a calm, experienced hand can make all the difference. Mrs. Cartwright has taught you well. Confidence, girls, is everything. A nervous man wants to be led. You embody that confidence, even if your stomach flutters with a familiar weariness. There are also the business travellers, passing through London, looking for a temporary escape from lonely hotel rooms and the pressures of commerce. They are often direct, sometimes brusque, but generally eager to conclude their business and move on. You meet their directness with your own, efficient and professional, and send them on their way. The night's transformation. As dusk begins to fall, the house undergoes its most significant transformation. Lamps are lit throughout the parlour and dining room, casting a warm, inviting glow that pushes back against the encroaching London gloom. Fires are stoked, their crackle and warmth a welcome contrast to the damp outside. The air fills with the scents of lamp oil burning coal and the anticipation of evening. This is when the girls truly transform. Your daytime attire is shed, replaced by the working clothes, the silks, velvets and laces that are a far cry from your simple cotton nightdress. You spend longer at the mirror, applying the cosmetics that Mrs. Cartwright provides. Rice powder to lighten your complexion, rouge to your cheeks and lips, kohl to darken your eyes. You carefully arrange your hair, perhaps adding the artificial pieces, creating voluminous curls and elegant waves. It's a mask, a persona you adopt, a way to separate the Mary who was a seamstress, the Mary who dreams of the seaside, from the Mary who entertains gentlemen. This transformation is crucial. It allows you to step into a role, to perform, without fully exposing your inner self. You are, in essence, becoming a commodity, and commodities must be polished to a shine. The sounds of the house shift too. The quiet, domestic hum of the day gives way to the muffled clatter of bottles in the bar, the low murmur of voices downstairs as the first evening customers arrive, and the occasional burst of piano music if Mrs. Cartwright has hired a musician for the night. The evenings are a dizzying blur of faces, names, often false, and conversations. You learn to read men quickly, their desires, their anxieties, their hidden vulnerabilities. Some want flattery, some want to boast, some simply want to be listened to without judgment. You become an expert at active listening, at asking just the right questions, at feigning interest in the most mundane of details. It's a performance, an emotional labour as much as a physical one. You meet men from all walks of life, prosperous merchants, clerks, army officers, even the occasional aristocratic rake slumming it in Haymarket. They come for various reasons: loneliness, curiosity, a desire for anonymity, or simply a need for physical release. You treat them all with the same practiced courtesy and detachment. You have developed a repertoire of phrases, a dance of veiled suggestions and gentle refusals, always maintaining control of the interaction. Mrs. Cartwright insists on it. A lady always dictates the terms, girls. Never forget your worth. It's a bizarre form of empowerment, born from a position of profound vulnerability. There are moments of genuine connection, rare and fleeting, but they happen. A kind word from a gentleman, a thoughtful gesture, a shared laugh that feels almost real. These are the moments you hold on to, the small glimmers of humanity in a profession that often strips it away, but mostly it's transactional, a negotiation of desires and expectations, concluded with the exchange of money. The money is good, certainly better than starvation wages for stitching, but it comes at a cost, a subtle erosion of the self, a quiet hardening around the edges of your soul. As the night deepens, the house fills with cigar smoke, the clinking of glasses, and the rising crescendo of chatter and laughter. Your feet ache in your fine shoes, your smile feels painted on, and the perfume and coal smoke mingle to create a heavy, cloying atmosphere. You move between the parlour and the private rooms, a silent efficiency in your movements. You are tired, but you push through, driven by the knowledge that each customer brings you closer to your weekly payment and a little closer to Lily's dream of the seaside, or your own, whatever that might be now. The aftermath and lingering shadows. The busiest hours stretch into the early morning. Around 2 or 3 a.m. the flow of customers begins to slow. The most persistent ones finally leave, their voices fading into the stillness of the pre-dawn London streets. The house settles into a tired quiet. This is when the girls gather in the kitchen again, no longer in their elaborate working clothes, but in simple nightdresses and shawls, exhausted but relieved. Cook might have left a pot of lukewarm tea, or perhaps a bit of leftover stew. You sit around the table, a stark contrast to the lively dinner discussions of breakfast. Now the talk is subdued, tired. You share anecdotes from the night, exchange knowing glances about particularly odd customers, or simply sit in companionable silence, too weary for words. Sometimes one of the younger girls, like Josephine, might weep quietly, overwhelmed by the day's events. You and Sarah and Emily offer quiet comfort, a hand squeeze, a shared sigh. There's a ritual to it, a communal unwinding. Before finally retiring, you perform a simplified version of your morning ablutions. A quick wash, the removal of the heavy makeup, a brush through your hair. You look at yourself in the mirror again, seeing the tired eyes beneath the fading kohl, the faint lines of fatigue around your mouth. This is the real you, revealed only to yourself in the dim light of your room. You return to your shared room where Lily is already asleep, her breathing deep and even. You slip under your thin woolen blanket, the horsehair mattress feeling both familiar and oddly comforting after a night of forced pleasantries. The faint scent of cheap lavender water is still there, mingled now with the lingering traces of tobacco and the subtle, sharp tang of disinfectant used downstairs. You close your eyes, the sounds of London now muted to a distant hum. Sleep comes quickly, a deep, necessary oblivion. But even in sleep, the day's experiences sometimes bleed into your dreams. Fleeting images of strange faces, disembodied voices, the clinking of coins. Sometimes you dream of the sea, of Brighton, a vast expanse of clean, cold air, washing away all the grime and the memories. You reach for it, a desperate yearning, but it always recedes, just out of reach. The unseen realities. This is your life, Mary. A constant balance between illusion and reality, between the performance of desire and the stark necessity of survival. It's a life lived on the fringes of respectable society, yet inextricably linked to it. The gentlemen who visit are often pillars of that very society, husbands, fathers, businessmen, politicians. They demand discretion, and the house provides it, maintaining a carefully constructed bubble of secrecy. The legal landscape is always a precarious one. While brothels are not strictly illegal, individual acts of public solicitation are. This meant established houses like Mrs. Cartwright's, which paid the right people and maintained a low profile, were generally tolerated. But the threat of a raid, a moral crusade, or a new zealous police chief was always present. It's a dance, a constant negotiation with authority, a silent understanding that as long as appearances are maintained and the right palms are greased, everyone can continue their business. The daily expenses are relentless. A portion of your earnings goes to Mrs. Cartwright for lodging, food, and the protection of the house. Another portion goes for the weekly medical checks, and for the cosmetics and elaborate clothing necessary for the work. There's always the need for new ribbons, fresh gloves, better shoes. Then there are the unexpected costs: a toothache, a persistent cough, the occasional small comfort like a special pastry or a new book. Saving is difficult, a constant uphill battle against the demands of the present. Yet the dream of escape, of a different life, persists. For some, it might be marriage, though that's rare for women in this profession. More often, it's a quiet retirement to a small cottage in the countryside, far from the choking fog and judging eyes of London. You're not alone in this life. There are thousands of women like you across London, across England, forced into this profession by circumstance, by poverty, by a society that offered them precious few other options. They are the invisible women, the ones erased from the polite histories, yet they are as much a part of the Victorian fabric as any factory worker or governess. They are the mirror reflecting the darker, unspoken desires of a society obsessed with respectability. As the sun begins to rise, a pale, weak light filtering through the grime of London's skyline, you are still asleep. Your breathing is slow and steady, your body finally at rest. The city outside begins its gradual awakening, the distant sounds of horses and carts and street vendors once again filling the air. For now, in this quiet, shared room, you are simply Mary, a woman sleeping, dreaming, and preparing in your own unique way to face another day in Victorian London. And so, as we gently leave Mary and her companions to their slumber, consider the layers of their lives, the mundane routines, the small luxuries, the shared laughter, the constant threat, and the ever-present dream of something more. Their story, often untold, offers a profound glimpse into the hidden corners of history, reminding us that even in the most challenging circumstances, human resilience, dignity, and a touch of dark humour can always find a way to shine through.